Chapter 1193. Lian Xiaozhou had been by Qin Yining's side for many years, but her heart still trembled when she heard so many people greet her in unison. She was about to take a step back when she remembered Qin Yining's teachings. She straightened her back, raised her chin, and said in a rough voice, "You may rise." The remaining elders of Beiji were so touched that they couldn't control themselves. They had served the last emperor of Beiji, so they knew the former emperor's appearance. If Lian Xiaozhou stood in front of them on a normal day, they wouldn't associate her with him and naturally wouldn't look too closely. However, now that Lian Xiaozhou was standing in front of them as a prince of the previous dynasty, they thought about it carefully. The more they looked at him, the more they felt like him. The more they looked at him, the more they felt. Lian Xiaozhou was even more flustered after being sized up. However, she thought about how Sir Xia had specially dressed her up before coming here. Sir Xia's disguise skills were uncanny, so no one would be able to tell that she was actually a woman. Her heart finally calmed down a little. The heavens have eyes. Song Quan was already in tears. He clutched his chest and said, "Now that Beiji is prosperous, they must have forgotten." "That's right, that's right." The remaining elders of Beiji behind him nodded obediently. Since Prince Zhongshuan said that he wanted to recognize the Beiji dynasty, they would definitely listen to Prince Zhongshuan. As for whether this prince was real or fake, whether it was Prince Zhongshuan's arrangement, or whether it was someone who wanted to help Wang Yi ascend the throne, it had nothing to do with them. They had just witnessed the tragedy of the extermination in the palace. No one wanted their own family to become like that. Loyal and patriotic. What a joke. They were afraid that they would lose their lives to meddle in other people's affairs. Naturally, they wanted to protect themselves so that they could continue to find a way out for the country. Everyone understood and immediately turned to ask for instructions from Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu. "Wang Yi, Duke, this official will order people to clean up the palace and invite His Highness to move in." Pang Xiao nodded slightly. "That's fine." Lian Xiaozhou was a little flustered and couldn't help but look at Qin Yining. Qin Yining smiled at her comfortingly from behind and nodded slightly. Only then did she relax and say in a deep voice, "Since that's the case, I'll have to trouble you all. Don't worry about it, don't worry about it. It's my duty." When the officials heard the little prince's voice, which had not yet changed, they couldn't help but think that if this person ascended to the throne in the future, based on their current observation, he probably wouldn't be able to control any state affairs, would he? After all, it didn't look like it was fully grown. In the future, there would probably be a regent in the imperial court. Therefore, it was clear at a glance who was more important and who needed to be treated with caution. The courtiers eagerly went to prepare, and Lian Xiaozhou entered the palace accompanied by the imperial bodyguards and servants arranged by Qin Yining in advance. Qin Yining and Pang Xiao stood in front of the palace gates and watched her leave with the crowd. Although they didn't show it on their faces, their slightly furrowed brows revealed some worry. Ji Ziyu said, "The other officials in the imperial court haven't appeared yet. I don't know what they'll say." Pang Xiao held Qin Yining's hand and squeezed it comfortingly. He smiled at Ji Ziyu and said, "It's fine. Everyone is smart. Perhaps some people aren't afraid of death, but everyone should want their families to live. Moreover, the factions in the imperial court are clear at a glance. If anyone has disloyal thoughts, it'll be easy to settle accounts in the future. I hope there's no one who doesn't understand the current situation." Ji Ziyu sighed softly. So far, everything had been going smoothly. Other than Li Qitian going crazy and killing his birth mother, his first wife, and his concubines, they hadn't killed anyone since the soldiers arrived at the city gates. None of them were homicidal maniacs. Naturally, they hoped that things would continue to go smoothly. Qin Yining was sent back to the military camp by Pang Xiao. He pulled her back to the tent. The 4 children had already been taken away by the wet nurse to rest. Ji Yun and Bing Tang saw that they had something to say, so they left. Jing Xiu and the others naturally set up a formation around the tent to prevent anyone from eavesdropping. Qin Yining tiredly sat down on the wooden bed that the army had temporarily set up. Now that she had returned to the quiet tent, her mind couldn't help but recall the tragic scene in Yangxin Palace Hall. The bloody scene of internal organs everywhere made her stomach churn. She couldn't help but retch twice. Pang Shao was originally taking off his outer robe. Hearing the noise, he quickly walked over and gently patted her delicate back with his large hand. I really shouldn't have brought you to the palace. I originally thought that since you've been with me for so many years, I should be with you at this time of enjoying the fruits of my labor. Who would have thought that Li Qitian would be so deranged? Qin Yining waved her hand and took the hot tea that Pang Shao brought over. She took a sip and suppressed her emotions before saying, "This can't be blamed on you. No one would have thought that the situation would turn out like that. But do you think that he's really crazy?" Pang Shao shook his head, a trace of a cold smile appearing on his lips. "He's not crazy." Qin Yining raised her eyes to look at Pang Shao. Pang Shao's gaze met with Qin Yining's eyes that seemed to be filled with starlight. His voice softened and he couldn't help but pull her into his arms. As he gently rocked her, he said in a gentle voice, "Do you remember that time when he and I were trapped together in the Beiji Mausoleum Palace?" Qin Yining nodded. At the time, Tian Jizi had said, 9th of September, golden light will appear. She had been so scared that her 3 souls and 7 spirits almost left her body. How could she not remember? Pang Shao said, "That day, I found many sacrifices to fill my stomach. Later, when I brought food to Li Qitian, I saw that he was eating human flesh. He was even eating Li Guanwen, the person who saved him." Although Qin Yining knew about this, he still couldn't help but feel nauseous. A person who can eat human flesh for a slim chance of survival has a strong will to live. Also, if a person eats human flesh when he's powerless, he's no longer a person. I think there are 3 reasons why he killed his birth mother, first wife, concubines, and attendants. First, he wanted to vent his anger. Second, he didn't want his women to be humiliated. Third, he wanted to give us a shock and make us believe that he's crazy. Only then can he live. Qin Yining slowly nodded. You're right. But when I think about it, I only feel that the Empress is pitiful. In the end, she's not an evil person. Also, when I was trapped in the palace by Li Qitian, she helped me. I heard that Li Hao had already been lost. Actually, I don't think it's that easy for a prince to be lost, but I don't want to investigate. Pang Shao smiled and kissed Qin Yining's forehead. She didn't say anything. A single spark can start a prairie fire. After 2 days, the tents surrounding the capital were dismantled. The South Pacifying Army was led by Commander Ma Dezhuang. They returned to the Yan dynasty's old capital and other places. Because most of the people in the South Pacifying Army were disaster victims that Pang Shao had taken in when she was traveling from the south to the capital, she allowed those who wanted to go back to their hometowns to return to their hometowns along the way. The soldiers who survived brought home the compensation that Prince Zhongshuan gave out of his own pocket. The compensation for those who died was doubled. They admired Prince Zhongshuan greatly. Therefore, the South Pacifying Army promoted Prince Zhongshuan's benevolence and righteousness the entire way. Even in the entire south of the capital, when the people mentioned Pang Shao, they all raised their thumbs and praised him. The 100,000 soldiers of the Tiger Army were ordered by Pang Shao to be stationed in several forts near the capital. The emperor killed the Empress Dowager and the concubines before committing suicide in the palace. The prince of the previous dynasty, Zhou Lian, returned to the palace and received the support of more than half of the ministers in the court. Even Prince Zhongshuan and Duke Dinghua, who held a large number of troops, bowed to Prince Zhou Lian. The coronation ceremony was set to be held on the 10th of December. Such news quickly spread throughout the country. When the various states received the news, they naturally had all sorts of thoughts. Some agreed, while others doubted. However, the North had the Dragon Legion Corps, the capital had the Tiger Army, and the South had the South Pacifying Army. Among the people, there were also the disaster victims that Pang Shao had saved and the South Pacifying Army soldiers released by the army. With that, not only was there no need to worry about public opinion, even if there were a few people who were unconvinced, under the eyes of the army, who would dare to say no. When it was the middle of the 12th month, the various states all expressed their approval and support for the restoration of the Northern Ji dynasty title. Qin Yining brought the children to live a leisurely and carefree life. They no longer had to worry about whether Pang Shao would be in danger on the battlefield. In addition, Qin Huaiyuan had already asked Liao Zhibing to bring back the relatives. Counting the days, they should be arriving soon. Qin Yining's mood was even better. He bathed in happiness every day. Even his face was rosier than before, and he finally became more plump. Mother! Look, a big snowball. Brother Han was wearing a thick cotton-padded jacket, deerskin boots, and a warm hat. His fair little face and small hands were red from the cold, but he was not afraid of the cold. He ran to Qin Yining with a big snowball the size of a cantaloupe, leaving a trail of footprints on the snow. Good boy, Mother saw it. Slow down, don't fall. Mother, look. On the other side of the snow, Zhao Gu was lying on the ground with his limbs spread wide open, forming a small human figure. Mother, look. Get up quickly, be careful not to catch a cold. Qin Yining was so worried that his heart was broken. He pulled Zhao Gu up and patted the snow off his body. Then, he chased after Han Gu, who was running all over the ground, and asked him to hand over the snowball. Zhao Gu also chased after him like crazy. Han Gu was very happy to be chased. He actually lifted his leg and leaped more than 10 feet away. Qin Yining was stunned. Before he could react, Zhao Gu also leaped and flew away. The two children also stopped playing in the snow. They ran around the trees and rocks in the courtyard and played a game of chasing each other. They were even using qigong. They were only 5 years old. Qin Yining panted with his hands on his waist. His face was red from running, and he exhaled a white mist in front of him. He pointed at the two little monkeys who were as light as swallows and was speechless for a long time. Ji Yun laughed and said, Heavens, eldest young master and second young master are too powerful. They have such skills at such a young age. It seems that concubine Chao was being modest when she said that she taught them some martial arts. Chapter 1194. Qin Yining couldn't care less about what he was wearing. When he saw the two children scurrying up the rockery, he was so scared that his heart jumped. He pushed away Bing Tang's hand that was about to put on the guanine pouch for her and ran towards the rockery. Come down quickly, Brother Zhao, Brother Han. Be good, come down quickly. But the two children were playing crazily, who would listen? They were still laughing loudly, clearly enjoying the joy of flying around in the snow. Qin Yining said anxiously from under the rockery, Come down quickly, be good. If you don't come down, I'll ask your Aunt Ji Yun to catch you. Brother Han stuck his tongue out at Qin Yining and even shook his butt mischievously. He was standing on the edge of the rockery, and he could fall down if he wasn't careful. Qin Yining was so scared that the hair on his back stood up. He hurriedly turned around and told Ji Yun, Quick, catch them quickly. When they heard this, Brother Zhao and Brother Han stopped chasing each other and began to run away from the cloud. Brother Zhao didn't like to speak, but Brother Han was laughing the entire way. His laughter, which belonged to a child's happy and crisp laughter, spread far and wide. Pang Xiao, Qin Huayuan, and Mu Jinghu came to the courtyard side by side. They saw Qin Yining anxiously stomping his feet and Ji Yun chasing the two naughty children all over the courtyard. Qin Huayuan couldn't help laughing when he saw this. Meanwhile, Pang Xiao leaped onto it. While Brother Zhao and Brother Han were feeling complacent, they suddenly felt their necks tighten. Their feet were lifted off the ground. The two boys waved their little hands and cried out loudly. When they turned around, they saw Pang Xiao's eyes. "You two naughty brats, why didn't you listen to your mother? Didn't you see that she was anxious? Running up and down in this cold weather and ignoring your mother to accompany you freezing in the snow, where are your manners? You're all older brothers, aren't you afraid that Brother Xian and Sister Yun will follow suit?" After a round of reprimanding, Brother Zhao and Brother Han lowered their heads, like two wild rabbits caught by a hunter who had given up struggling. Even their ears drooped down. When Pang Xiao saw the two children lowering their heads, his heart softened. However, he wanted to maintain the image of a strict father and put the two children on the ground. Qin Yining immediately went forward to pat the snow off the children's shoulders and hats. He also straightened out their clothes, which had been pulled askew by the Pang Xiao. Zhao Guge raised his head and looked at Qin Yining. His small voice trembled as he said, "Mother, I was wrong." Seeing his older brother apologize, Han Gu also hurriedly said, "Han Gu was also wrong. Mother, don't be angry." As he said this, he went forward to hug Qin Yining's waist and buried himself in her embrace. Qin Yining hugged Brother Zhao and Brother Han and said helplessly, "Don't do it again. Otherwise, Mother will really punish you." "Yes." The two brothers happily agreed. Qin Huayuan came forward with his hands clasped behind his back. "In a moment, you two will start copying the filial piety. Everyone will copy it once and show it to me the day after tomorrow." Han Gu raised his head and screamed, "Grandfather, Mother already said we won't be punished." "Your mother said we won't be punished, but when did Grandfather ever say we won't be punished?" The two children immediately wilted. "For a moment of fun, the two of you ignored your mother's worries and your own safety. I'm afraid you've forgotten all the things I taught you about filial piety." Han Gu was immediately unconvinced and wanted to refute, but Zhao Gu grabbed his small hand. "We know we were wrong." He understood his grandfather's temper too well. The more he quibbled, the heavier the punishment. Big Bro Han also thought of this and didn't say anything else. The two children dejectedly held hands and went to copy the filial piety scriptures. Qin Yining watched them walk away and couldn't help but laugh. Father still has a way. The two of them are very naughty. Han Gu is very smart, but Zhao Gu is even smarter than his younger brother. He just doesn't like to say it out loud. Qin Huayuan's eyes were full of love when he spoke of his two grandsons. Pang Xiao said gratefully, "It's all thanks to father-in-law that Sister Yi and I didn't have the chance to take care of them. If it weren't for father-in-law's guidance, I don't know what these two children would have grown up to be." Qin Huayuan was well-read and outstanding in strategizing. He had experienced ups and downs in the officialdom for most of his life, so he naturally had his own principles when it came to dealing with people. How could the children he brought up be wronged in the future? Pang Xiao was extremely grateful to Qin Huayuan. He was grateful that he had open-mindedly created the conditions to betroth Qin Yining to him that day. He was grateful for his support over the years, both in the open and in the dark. He was even more grateful that he had taken care of his family and children so well. Although Qin Huayuan was his father-in-law, in his heart, he had long worshipped and respected his father-in-law as if he were his biological father. As they chatted, they returned to the room. The maidservant served hot tea and snacks, and they all ate some to warm up. Qin Yining then said, "Mother, grandmother, and the others should be arriving soon, right?" "Soon," Peng Xiao said with a smile, "I've already sent people to welcome them. They should arrive in the capital in these 2 days." Qin Yining slowly looked forward to it. "I haven't seen mother in a long time. There's also grandmother and maternal grandmother. I don't know if they'll be coming. It's really hard for them to come all the way from Xia." Qin Huayuan said with a smile, "Your grandmother can't come out. It's because she's old and can't withstand the torment. Your maternal grandmother's health is actually not good, but with her personality, she will definitely come to see you after such a big matter. Moreover, with your mother's temperament, your maternal grandmother won't be at ease. As for your maternal grandmother and mother-in-law, they will also be coming back for Jishi." Qin Yining thought about it and nodded with a smile. "It's been so long since we've been separated. I really miss them. In the past, I had no choice but to send them away for their safety. Now that we can finally live a peaceful life, it's naturally better for the family to gather together." Peng Xiao also nodded. "That's right, we'll be living a good life soon. It'll be good for the family to be together." Qin Huayuan smiled and nodded, then asked about the living arrangements and other matters. Qin Yining answered them one by one. He explained the location and layout of the courtyard in detail and asked Qin Huayuan if there were any mistakes in it. The father and daughter were discussing when Ji Yun suddenly walked in quickly and said in a low voice, "Wang Yi, princess consort, Boss Qiu requests to see you." Mu Jinghu, who was sitting next to Peng Xiao and quietly drinking tea, suddenly paused. She suddenly raised her head, and her gaze turned cold for a moment. She immediately put down her teacup, stood up, and said, "Gishi, I'm going out for a walk." Without waiting for Mu Jinghu to take a step, Peng Xiao pushed him back to his seat. "Don't go, why are you leaving now? Boss Qiu supported the army in order to appease you. She wrote letter after letter of apology, but you're not moved at all. All of us are anxious for you. She didn't harm you and even gave birth to brother Yan for you. Are you really going to disown your son and wife? But she used you. That's because we're in different positions. Moreover, she didn't really harm me. If you really don't want your wife and son because of this, then what do you want me and Sister Yi to do?" "That's right." Qin Yining also nodded. Qin Huayuan shook his head and sighed. "You two can sleep on the same pillow for 100 years. With such fate, it's best not to miss it. Young Master Mu, everything is just a fleeting cloud. You have to know how to cherish her." Mu Jinghu hesitated when he heard this. Chapter 1195. Ji Yun and Bing Tang stood on either side of the door to welcome them. Bing Tang lifted the bright red bamboo curtain. The air conditioner outside the door was hit by the hot air inside the house, and there was a dense white fog in front of the door. The cold air was close to the ground, and a thin layer of frost hung on the red carpet and quickly melted. A pair of small tiger-head cotton-padded shoes stepped on the carpet. Looking up, it was a chubby little boy wearing a gorilla red brocade jacket and a white rabbit fur hat. Perhaps he was afraid of strangers. He stood at the door and did not dare to take a step forward. He looked around with his big eyes and found that the environment was completely unfamiliar. He opened his mouth and was about to cry. At this time, a pair of hands gently pinched his cheeks. Qiu Feishan was wearing a dark blue jacket with narrow sleeves and a white horse face skirt. She was wearing a yang fei-colored vest with white rabbit fur. Her long hair was tied up in a simple bun and fixed with a golden flower hairpin. Qiu Feishan held her son's hand and looked up at the few people in the floor-to-ceiling shelter. She smiled slightly. She was dressed in women's clothes and had a soft figure. When she bent down to hold the child's hand and looked up with a smile, Mu Jinghu's heart skipped a beat. Qin Yining quickly came out to greet her. "You're here. It's cold today and it's snowing. Why didn't you tell me? I could have picked you up. What if Brother Yan got cold? It's okay. I was careful when I came. Qiu Feishan bent down and took Brother Yan's finger that was in his mouth. Brother Yan, what do you want to say when you see your Aunt Qin? Brother Yan shyly pouted and turned to hug Qiu Feishan's leg, burying his little face in his mother's skirt. Qin Yining could not help but laugh. He doesn't see me often. I'm afraid he has forgotten about the past. Brother Yan. Why don't you greet people? How did your mother teach you? But Brother Yan refused to answer. Qin Yining held Qiu Feishan's hand and walked into the house. He's only 3 years old. You don't have to be so strict. Qiu Feishan took her son's hand and followed Qin Yining into the inner room. Her beautiful eyes swept across the room and saw that Mu Jinghu was only looking down at his son. Qiu Feishan's smile stiffened, but she quickly adjusted her emotions. Seeing that Qin Huayuan was also there, she immediately bowed to Pang Xiao. Qin Yining asked Ji Yun to prepare hot tea and asked Bing Tang to prepare the children's favorite snacks. After thinking for a while, he told Ziyuan, don't ask Brother Han and Brother Zhao to copy books. Ask them to come out and meet the guests. Tell them that Aunt Mu and Brother Yan are here. Okay. Ziyuan agreed and turned around to leave. Qin Yining saw that Qiu Feishan and Mu Jinghu didn't greet each other. After thinking for a while, he took the initiative to ask Qiu Feishan, why do you want to come at this time? Qiu Feishan looked at Mu Jinghu and hugged Brother Yan to sit on her lap. She played with his little hand and said, I have nothing to do now. All the 4 links have been handed over to the Qiu family. It's not appropriate to stay in the same place. As soon as these words came out, everyone was surprised. Mu Jinghu asked doubtfully, you gave the 4 links to the Qiu family. Don't you care about the power of the Qiu family and the financial resources of the 4 links? Now that the Qiu family has completed the exchange of power with the hidden aristocratic family, you are actually willing to give it up. Qiu Feishan smiled bitterly, what kind of person am I in your heart? My grandfather was the previous head of the Qiu family. He cherished me and raised me as his grandson. I can't completely abandon the Qiu family at the critical moment. The 4 links is also my painstaking effort, and I do care about it. But now that the war is over, there is no need for me to use the money. That kind of wealth is just a burden in my hands. There will naturally be other people to take care of the Qiu family. I will just take care of the children in the future. Why would I care about those things? Mu Jinghu still had a look of disbelief. Because Qiu Feishan's words just explained her past actions. It sounded quite reasonable, and it made him look like he was wrong to keep harping on it. Mu Jinghu couldn't help but frown. All his anger came from a sense of justice and morality. He didn't expect that this would make it seem like he didn't care about the lives of his wife and children. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining looked at each other and sighed in their hearts. Mu Jinghu was not a stupid person. If he was, he wouldn't have been able to practice such powerful martial arts. It was just that he didn't have time to think about scheming. It was easy for Qiu Feishan to play tricks in front of him. But even if Qiu Feishan had a little trick, they could see that she didn't have any intention to hurt Mu Jinghu. Instead, she wanted to please him, so the two of them didn't say much. Mu Jinghu was silent for a long time before he said, you spent so much effort in managing the 4 links, and now you are giving it all up. Are you willing to give it all up? Qiu Feishan stroked Yan Guer's head. The child leaned softly in Qiu Feishan's eyes, playing with his fingers while looking curiously at Mu Jinghu. Now that Yan Guer is slowly growing up, and you have been away from me for such a long time, how can I not understand what is the most important thing? Some things, once put down, are not difficult to give up. Mu Jinghu was already a lot shaken, and now that he was talking to Qiu Feishan face to face, the last line of defense in his heart collapsed. He couldn't help but let out a big smile, got up and walked up to Yan Gu, hugged him in his arms, and kissed him a few times. Mu Jinghu's movements were too fast, and Yan Gu didn't have time to react. After being kissed, he was pressed into an unfamiliar embrace, and the actions were so rough that it hurt his little body. Yan Gu finally opened his mouth and cried out loudly, "Mother, mother." Mu Jinghu was at a loss. He was annoyed that the child didn't recognize him, and refused to put Yan Gu down. He kept saying, "Look, I'm your father, why are you crying? Look at me, call me father, father." Wah! Mother, I want mother. Yan Gu cried until he was about to hiccup. Qiu Feishan was very angry at Mu Jinghu, and took the child back and coaxed him for a while before he stopped crying. Mu Jinghu stood aside like a block of wood, awkwardly not knowing whether to advance or retreat. Seeing that their family was so harmonious, Qin Yining finally smiled. Han Gu and Zhao Gu were brought in by Zi Yuan, and the two children entered the door with thorough etiquette. Although they were unfamiliar with Qiu Feishan, they were extremely polite and took the initiative to take Yan Gu to play. Yan Gu liked the two little brothers more than he liked his father, so he also smiled at this moment. Mu Jinghu was even more frustrated when he saw the child like that. Qin Yining arranged a courtyard for Mu Jinghu and Qiu Feishan to live in. 2 days later, Liao Zhibing and the brothers of the Qing-Tian alliance finally entered the capital with a long motorcade, and went straight to the prince's mansion. Meng Qin first came to the city to report to Qin Yining. At that time, Qin Yining and Qiu Feishan were playing with the 5 children in the house. When they heard the news, they stood up happily. Qiu Feishan asked doubtfully, "Your family is back?" Qin Yining nodded repeatedly, and ordered the wet nurse to put on Zhao Gu and Han Gu's clothes. "You two follow mother to pick up great-grandma and the others." Okay. The 2 children were very happy, and after putting on the clothes, they hurriedly ran out together. Qiu Feishan thought about it carefully and understood everything. She secretly thought that Pang Xiao and Qin Yining were indeed careful enough. It turned out that the previous escape plan had deceived everyone. Qin Yining temporarily bid farewell to Qiu Feishan, put on his cloak, and went out with his people. Out of the Chuihua gate, through the corridor, and quickly into the outer courtyard, they met Pang Xiao, Qin Huayuan, and Mu Jinghu, who were also walking out quickly. Everyone went to the door together, and the carriages slowly stopped. Liao Zhibing jumped off the horse and ordered the coachman with the people of the Qing-Tian alliance. When the footstool was put down, several people came down from the carriages one after another. The first ones to come down were the Sun clan and Madame Zheng. Without waiting for Qin Yining to speak, Zhao Gu and Han Gu had already rushed over, and hugged each other's legs. "Grandmother, great-grandmother. Ah! Good children." The Sun clan and Madame Zheng were very happy, and when they saw Qin Yining quickly walking over, their eyes were a little wet. "Sister E. Grandmother. Mother." Qin Yining came forward and hugged the two, and couldn't help but sob. At this time, Madame Ma and Yao Qinggu got off the carriage, and the Yao clan also stood beside Madame Ma. When they saw Qin Yining, the Sun clan, and Madame Zheng hugging each other and crying, the 3 of them also felt a little emotional. Madame Ma and Yao clan's eyes were slightly hot, and Yao Qinggu shook his head and sighed. Pang Xiao had already come forward to greet them. "Grandmother, you've had a hard journey." Qin Yining also wiped her tears politely and bowed to Yao Qinggu. "Old master, old madam, grandmother, greetings." Madame Ma supported Qin Yining with both hands, and didn't care about the awkwardness on Yao Qinggu and Yao clan's faces. She pulled her to the side and looked at her from head to toe. "I heard from Mr. Liao along the way that little E has suffered." It's not that hard, but fortunately, the hard times are over, and the good times are coming. Qin Yining held Madame Ma's hand and said with a smile, Grandmother, Sister Yi, and Brother Xian are still young, and it's too cold outside, so I didn't ask anyone to announce them. You'll see them later. Ah, good, good. Dai Fu is blessed to have a pair of children, Brother Zhao and Brother Han. Now, he has a pair of fraternal twins. Brother Zhao and Brother Han had already rushed over and surrounded Madame Ma, calling her great-grandmother. After greeting each other happily, the whole family returned to the manor hand in hand. Qin Yining didn't see second uncle and third uncle's family, so she was a little disappointed. She held the Sun clan's arm and whispered, Mother, how's old Madame's health? Not very good. Old Madame is old. She's been through a lot of ups and downs, and now she's exhausted. Now that Sister Hui is by her side, and old Madame has feelings for that child, she's in a better mood, and her body looks stronger. Your second uncle, third uncle, and your cousin all have their own duties in Xia, so we didn't dare to all come out. We were afraid that the situation would change when we returned, so after some discussion, only the three of us came out. Qin Yining nodded in understanding. Xia was such a large place, and there were many indigenous people in it. Qin Huayuan must have spent a lot of effort to take all of it for their own use, so they naturally couldn't leave it all to others. Chapter 1196. Qin Yining was immersed in the joy of reunion. He kept chatting with the Sun clan all the way, so he didn't notice that the Sun clan was a little hesitant. The group of people returned to the inner residence. Naturally, the elders went to see Brother Xian and Sister Yun happily first. Madame Ma liked them very much. Madame Zhang and the Sun clan teased the children together. Yao clan stood outside the crowd with her hands crossed. She just stretched her neck and looked curiously at them. Then she turned back and pulled Pang Xiao aside to talk. Son, I heard that you were fighting with the Tauters. I was so anxious. Your grandparents were so worried that they couldn't sleep and eat all day. Now you won the battle and the Emperor committed suicide. Who has the final say in the world? Can you? Madame Dowager. Pang Xiao interrupted Yao clan and said with a smile, You are tired. Don't worry about these trivial things. Hearing this, Yao clan's face changed immediately. She couldn't help raising her voice, I haven't seen you for so long. You still don't want to call me mother. Can't you figure out who is the closest person to you after such a long time? Madame Dowager, you must be joking. We are such a rich family and you have a noble status. We don't want to call you mother. Look at other rich families. Which one of them doesn't call you mother according to your status? You are Madame Dowager. She looked at Yao Qinggu who frowned, You are old master. My grandmother is Madame Dowager. But my grandmother is free and easy. She has never cared about status. Naturally, I still call her grandmother. I don't care. Yao clan shouted. Pang Xiao looked at her in confusion, You don't care. Really? Yao clan thought of her complacency on the way back to the capital. If Pang Xiao usurped the power of Li Qitian, she would be the Empress Dowager. At that time, she would be rich and noble. She would have the final say in the harem. Wouldn't she wake up from her dream with a smile? Now facing Pang Xiao's suspicious eyes, Yao clan couldn't say that she didn't care. She knew her son too well. Pang Xiao was not a person who could be fooled. If she lied, it would only deepen her son's hatred of her. Yao Shi only turned around and said, All right, whatever you say. Is that okay? Her tone was full of tolerance for ignorant children. Calm Pang Xiao smiled and didn't talk with the Yao clan and Yao Qinggu anymore. Yao Shi held her breath, but she was also afraid that others would see her embarrassed state and lose face. She could only suppress her anger and complain to Yao Qinggu in a low voice, "Father, look at what he's like. He's only thinking about outsiders. He doesn't even know who his mother is." "I don't know what that little vixen of the Qin clan said to him." Yao Qinggu frowned and reprimanded, "You still don't know how to restrain yourself. It doesn't matter if the Qin clan is right or wrong. Dai Fu likes her. She did give birth to children. But Zhao Gu and Han Gu are suspicious. Xian Gu is your grandson, and Yun Gu is your granddaughter." He lowered his voice and said, "Don't forget. If Dai Fu can become the emperor, she will be the empress." "So what? So what if she is the empress? When Dai Fu becomes the emperor, will he only like her? She will be old and withered, right? Besides, Dai Fu can have many empresses and concubines, but I am the only empress dowager." "Is that so?" Yao Qinggu sneered, "Then wait and see. There is only one empress dowager. But the empress dowager and the concubines are the same. You can have them all." Yao Clan's heart skipped a beat. She looked at Yao Qinggu in disbelief and whispered, "Father, it can't be, you little girl. If you don't believe me, just wait and see." Yao Qinggu flung his sleeves and turned to sit down. Yao Clan's heart was nervous. Happiness was in front of her. She couldn't miss it just because she didn't like the Qin clan. Anyway, there was still a long way to go. As long as she could stand firm, so what if she was the empress? She still had to respect her mother-in-law. Thinking of this, Yao Clan's heart was filled with anticipation that Pang Xiao could become the emperor. However, something that disappointed her happened very quickly. After coming out of the desert, the Yao clan put on airs and didn't interact much with the people below. Therefore, Yao clan had no idea about the changes in the court. On the 10th day of the 12th lunar month, Prince Zhou Lian of Beiji ascended the throne and announced to the world that the country was still called Beiji and the era was called New Beginning. De Zhou, who had been powerful for 10 years, was just a flash in the pan in history. After the new emperor ascended the throne, he pardoned the people and rewarded them. Li Qitian, who was imprisoned in a secret room in the palace, found out that the new emperor was Zhou Lian. He stared blankly for a long time and didn't come back to his senses. Peng Zhishi didn't want to be the emperor himself. This wasn't in line with his style at all. But he was a madman now. A madman wouldn't care about these things. Li Qitian was full of doubts but couldn't show it. He lost weight in a few days. Like Li Qitian, the Yao clan also lost weight. Originally, she came with a happy heart. She only thought that she was going to be the Empress Dowager. In the future, she would be the most honorable woman in the world. She could forget about the suffering she suffered in the early years because she had enough to make all the women envious. But now, the duck in her mouth flew away. Even if she was Wang Ye's mother, how could it be more honorable than being the Empress Dowager? The Yao clan didn't eat for a few days. When she saw Qin Yining playing with the children and heard them laughing and playing, she panicked. Naturally, she didn't have a good expression. Madame Ma didn't care about this. She saw the Yao clan's gloomy faces several times and directly scolded them away. "If you're unhappy, don't come out and be an eyesore. Go back and lie down." The Yao clan was really afraid of Madame Ma's slaps and salts, so they could only go back. The subtle atmosphere in the family lasted until the 21st of the 12th lunar month. No one expected that the new emperor, who had just ascended the throne for 10 days, would announce to the world that he was going to abdicate Prince Zhongshuan before the end of the year. At the imperial court meeting, Prince Zhongshuan repeatedly refused, but the immature new emperor said bluntly, "I don't have this ability. I can't do anything for the people of Beiji. If I force myself to sit in this position, I will slowly become an incapable ruler like the two former emperors. I don't want things to become like that. The people have been tormented for nearly 20 years. Someone should give them a peaceful and prosperous era. His words caused all the officials to fall silent. No matter what the people thought, no one in the imperial court objected. More than half of the officials even knelt down and shouted, "Your Majesty is devoted to the people. Your Majesty is wise. Prince Zhongshuan has worked hard and made great contributions. His talent is outstanding. We agree." Sitting upright on the dragon throne, Lian Shaozong secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She felt relaxed as if she had finally thrown away a hot potato. She immediately handed over the country to Pang Xiao without any hesitation. She personally issued a decree that the Great Hall of Abdication and the Empress coronation ceremony would be held tomorrow. This was a delicate time. There were only 10 days left until the new year. According to the old customs, the new emperor had to use the former emperor's reign name when he ascended the throne. He could only change it to a new reign name after the new year. In other words, Pang Xiao didn't have to wait for a long year. After 10 days, there would be a change of dynasty. The news spread throughout the capital. The new emperor said that he didn't have the talent to rule the country. For the sake of the people, he abdicated the throne to the great hero in the hearts of the people. Although it was unexpected, the people could accept it. Qin Yining was taking an afternoon nap with the 4 children at home. Ji Yun quickly walked in. She didn't care about anything else and gently pushed Qin Yining awake. She lowered her voice and said excitedly, "Wang Fei, after the abdication ceremony tomorrow, it will be the coronation ceremony." Wang Yi ordered people to come to the Fu to bring the entire family into the palace. Qin Yining stilled and slowly sat up. A moment later, he smiled in relief. Chapter 1197. Qin Yining had accompanied Pang Xiao to this day. Although she had never thought of fighting for glory and wealth in the future, she had never thought of being the empress. Compared to sitting in that high position and going from one soul-stirring period to another, she preferred to enjoy the leisurely life with Pang Xiao. However, she also understood very early that they had already come to this point, and it was not up to them to do whatever they wanted. Moreover, which man didn't have the desire to control the world and fight for hegemony? Now, all of Pang Xiao's efforts had paid off. Qin Yining was happy for him. Along the way, they had all paid too much. "Wang Fei, are you still in a daze?" Ji Yun saw that Qin Yining was in a daze. She couldn't help but smile and wave her hand in front of her eyes. She whispered, "Why don't you get ready quickly?" Qin Yining came back to her senses. "Have you told the old madam and the others?" "I have already told them." Qin Yining called Ziyuan and the others to come in and help to tidy up. While helping Qin Yining coax the children to get up and let the wet nurses take them to change clothes, she whispered. When the old madam heard the news, she fainted on the spot. However, she woke up in a breath. She laughed a few times in the courtyard. Just now, she called herself the Empress Dowager. Qin Yining nodded and didn't comment on the Yao clan's reaction. The family was ready in the evening. Qin Huaiyuan, the Sun clan, Madame Jing, and the others naturally accompanied them into the palace. The palace had been cleaned up during this period of time. Qin Yining was directly arranged to live in Kunning Palace, while the Yao clan went to Xi'an Palace. In the past, Qin Yining came to Kunning Palace to greet the Empress. Now, things had changed, but Kunning Palace was still the same as before. It was richly decorated. Living in a brand new place, Qin Yining could not help but frown slightly. Even though he had accepted reality, the resistance in his heart was not something he could completely let go of in a short period of time. Qin Huaiyuan and his entourage were placed in the side chamber of the Palace of Earthly Tranquility. The palace servants were all very cautious. They bent their backs and worked quickly and efficiently, not daring to take the initiative to come forward and talk. Qin Huaiyuan, the Sun Clan, and Chao Yuqing went to the main hall after settling down. Ji Yun, Bing Tang, Ziyuan, and Smile were all instructing the palace maids to do things. The room was obviously a little noisy, but Qin Yining, who was sitting next to the main seat, looked thin and lonely. Qin Huaiyuan paused in his steps. Chao Yuqing also frowned worriedly. The Sun Clan did not think too much. She looked around and said, "Sister Yi, this palace is too big. I don't know if it will be lonely in the future." Qin Yining was startled by the Sun Clan's words. He quickly stood up with a smile and took the Sun Clan's hand. "Mother is here." When she saw Qin Huaiyuan and Chao Yuqing, she bowed and said, "I was distracted just now. I didn't notice." The palace servants in the room immediately became nervous. They were afraid that the new empress, who would take office tomorrow, would blame them for not reporting in time. They were trembling with fear and could not understand their master's temper. Qin Huaiyuan waved his hand and sat down casually opposite Qin Yining. "We are all family. There is no need to be so formal." Qin Yining asked the family to sit down and asked Ji Yun to prepare hot tea. "Where are the children?" The Sun Clan took a sip of the tea and savored the taste. "Why do I feel that the tea in the palace is better than the tea at home? The wet nurse is taking care of the children." Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh. "That is the tea we brought from the prince's estate." The Sun Clan did not believe in heresy. She took another sip and smacked her lips. "Maybe it's because of the difference in mood. My son is going to be the empress. As a mother, I am very happy." Qin Yining smiled. "What is there to be happy about? You don't understand. Isn't this the highest honor in a woman's life?" Qin Yining was startled and then smiled. The Sun Clan was right. Which woman in the world would think that the empress was not honorable? Women were inseparable from the fate of marriage. After marriage, they would fight in the inner residence. At most, they could make their own decisions in the family. Perhaps she really was envied by others now. Seeing that Qin Yining was not in high spirits, Qin Huaiyuan smiled and said, "Tomorrow is the abdication ceremony. Have you thought about how to deal with some people and matters in the future?" The Sun Clan did not understand. They knew that the men were talking about serious matters, so they did not say anything. Qin Yining immediately understood who Qin Huaiyuan was talking about. After Zhou Lian abdicated, what would this prince of the previous dynasty do? Qin Yining's jade-like fingertips lightly looked at the black lacquered Polonia wood table. He slowly made some calculations in his mind. The family ate dinner in Kunning Palace. Pang Shao was probably busy and did not appear. When it was time to light the lanterns, Qin Yining suddenly remembered that they were already in the palace. The emperor would not spend the night in the concubines' palaces. In the future, when the harem was enriched, there would be many beautiful women taking turns to serve the emperor. Even if she wanted to see Pang Shao, she would not be able to see him at any time. It depended on whether Pang Shao was free or had the heart. When Qin Yining thought of this, the gloominess that had just come from eating with the family inexplicably arose again. Her life in the harem had not yet begun, but she already felt so oppressed that she could not breathe. The palace lanterns hung high. Bing Tang and Ji Yun brought silk lanterns. The eunuchs and palace maids went outside the hall. There were only 3 people left in the hall. The large Kunning palace was so quiet that it was as if the sound of the north wind could be heard. Qin Yining leaned against the big red pillow and patted the edge of the Kong bed next to the window. "You all sit down. There are no outsiders here." Ji Yun and Bing Tang looked at each other. They wanted to refuse, but no one knew about Qin Yining's gloominess. The two of them served Qin Yining closely and understood her the most. How could they not understand? In order to prevent her from being even more unhappy, they sat down sideways. Where are the children? Princess consort, the children have all gone to old madam's place. Boss Chiu did not bring Brother Yen in. Brother Zhao and Brother Han are still thinking about Brother Yen. They are not very happy today. The matter of the children made Qin Yining's brows relax a little. They have a good relationship. Yes, Wang Yi and young Master Mu have a good relationship. Brother Yen and Brother Yen naturally have a good relationship. With a few words, the atmosphere became more lively. The air seemed to be less stagnant. Qin Yining sighed. Looking at the unfamiliar environment around her, she was a little dispirited. Prepare to take a bath. Rest early later. We still have things to do tomorrow. Yes. The two of them immediately ordered someone to prepare hot water. After taking a bath, Qin Yining dried her long hair. Then, she changed into a snow-white nightgown and walked to the inner room. Bing Tang asked worriedly, Princess consort, aren't you going to wait for Wang Yi? He's probably busy. There's no need to wait. Qin Yining smiled and sat down on the edge of the bed. She reached out and touched the warm hot water under the blanket. She said with relief, we have to get used to it early. He will be busier and busier in the future. According to the rules of the palace, there will be no such thing as coming back to rest. In the future, I can save the trouble of waiting for him to come home. Bing Tang's nose twitched when she heard that. Tears almost fell. Princess consort had sacrificed so much for Wang Yi. She had tested the boundaries of life and death several times. How many times had she visited the gates of hell? Could it be that in the end, she would only be lonely in the palace? She was about to speak when Ji Yun pulled her hand and shook her head. Qin Yining lay down and pulled the blanket over herself. She said with a smile, when the important matters are settled, I will help you prepare for the wedding. In the past, I wanted to prepare a house and dowry for you so that you can get married in a grand manner. In the future, you will come back to my side to be a steward's wife. The three of us will be together forever. Now, Huzi and Tang Xiuxiu have their own futures. The two of you will be madams with ranks in the future. In the future, you can only enter the palace when you have the chance. Fortunately, there have always been many people in the palace. Bing Tang's tears finally fell. She rushed forward and pulled Qin Yining's hand. Miss, I won't marry. I will accompany you forever. In the future, there will be many people in the palace. With me here, not only can I take care of your body, I can also research more colorless and tasteless poisons. If anyone dares to have bad intentions towards you, we will poison them to death. Qin Yining didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She sat up and pulled Bing Tang's hand. You silly girl. If you don't want to marry because of this, won't Huzi come to my door and hang himself? Bing Tang was crying sadly. When she heard this, she choked and almost broke her facade. Ji Yun lowered her head and wiped her tears. I don't want to be an official's wife in the future. I just want to follow you. This deep palace was lonely. It was originally a new and unfamiliar environment. When the time came, there would be no one she could trust by her side. Even the love she had always sincerely given would change. How helpless would Qin Yining be if she was trapped in this deep palace alone? Ji Yun sat down on the other side of the bed and placed her fair hand on Qin Yining's and Bing Tang's hands. Whether Tang Xiu is good or bad, it has nothing to do with me. He has his own future, and I have my own place to go. In this world, it's not necessary to get married if you have feelings for each other. Once you get married, everything can change. It's better to leave everything at the most beautiful stage and give each other a good memory. It's better not to let each other become detestable in the end. Ji Yun smiled. Miss, I'm serious. I won't get married. I'll accompany you in the future. I have martial arts with me. If anyone dares to have any bad thoughts, there's no need to use Bing Tang's poison. I'll kill her first. Bing Tang nodded repeatedly. If Huzi wants to hang himself, then let him do it. He looks carefree, but he's actually the most successful. I don't believe that he'll seek death for a little girl. Men are like that. They'll be happy if they don't get married for the rest of their lives. Miss, it's settled. We'll follow you in the future. Qin Yining shook her head. She didn't want to cry, but at this moment, she couldn't hold it in. When she looked down, a few tears fell on the front of her clothes. What nonsense are you saying? When I'm the Empress, will you not listen to me when I appoint a marriage for you? All right. Don't let your imagination run wild. You've been with me for the past few years, and you've already become old ladies. I can't let your lives be incomplete. Don't mention this again in the future. Miss, the three of them spoke in the bedchamber. Chapter 1198. Snow fell on the collar and shoulders, and landed on Pang Zhao's black sable fur cloak. Under the light of the palace lantern hanging high in the corridor, it appeared even brighter. Pang Zhao's hands behind his back were tightly clenched into fists. His heart seemed to have been viciously gripped by someone and then stabbed a few times with a nail. He had just returned and wanted to order someone to pass on the message. The palace attendant in the corridor with her head bowed told him in a low voice that Wang Fei and the two people beside her had a private conversation. Pang Zhao saw that the palace attendant's face was completely red, and her eyes were slightly amorous. He didn't like it, but he didn't immediately express his position. He wanted to wait for Qin Yining, Ji Yun, and Bing Tang to finish talking before going in. Who would have thought that his extraordinary senses allowed him to hear the faint sounds of talking and sobbing in the inner hall? He suddenly realized that Qin Yining had not come to this palace to enjoy wealth and glory, but to enter a cage made of gold. Pang Zhao knew very well what life in the palace was like. Also, inside the palace walls, Qin Yining had been locked up like an animal by Li Qitian. She hadn't been given food or water, and had almost starved to death. She had also been bullied in Kuan-Ning Palace and Xi'an Palace. She was forced to live in a completely unfamiliar place. In the future, she might have to face the 3 palaces and 6 courtyards. She had to work hard to manage this inner palace, and be a generous empress. She had to abide by those rules. No matter how much she missed her husband, she could not overstep her boundaries. Otherwise, she would be laughed at by the people of the world. Other people hoped for this kind of wealth and glory, but Qin Yining might not want it. Pang Zhao's heart felt suffocated and then panicked. He had really been too busy and didn't notice these details. He had let her and the 2 servant girls hug each other and cry. The palace servants did not hear the conversation inside, but the person who had stopped Pang Zhao was a sensitive person. Today, the Prince Zhongshuan Fei had not been in a good mood since she had entered the palace. The 2 personal servant girls that Wang Fei had brought were also very cautious, so she had some more ideas. Now, seeing Pang Zhao standing at the door with a cold and hard expression and his body so tense that it was as if he was standing in front of a hard rock, no one could ignore his murderous aura and the sharpness in his eyes. The eunuchs and palace maids in front of the palace gate were so frightened that they lowered their heads and did not dare to move. After a while, Pang Zhao lowered her head and looked at the palace maid who replied. "What's your name?" The palace maid was stunned for a moment before she was overjoyed. "Wang Yi, my name is Chen Yao." "Yes. Send someone to remember that Chen Yao harbors evil intentions and intends to sow discord between master and her master. Immediately banish her from the palace and never hire her again." Chunyao turned pale with fright. Wang Yi. Wang Yi. This servant has been wronged. Wronged? It's written all over your eyes. Do you think this king is blind? Cunning Palace does not need such an evil person. You all remember this. Pang Xiao turned around and looked at all the palace servants beside him. In this palace, who is the master and who is the servant? If there are any more delusions like today, it won't be as simple as banishing them from the palace. Yes. Everyone responded in unison. The noise outside the door had alarmed the three people in the bedchamber. Qin Yining put on a small jacket and quickly walked out with Bing Tang Ji Yun. They saw Pang Xiao push open the door and enter. The moment the bamboo curtain was put down, they saw the figure of a palace maid being dragged away with her mouth covered. Pang Xiao took off his large jacket and casually handed it to Ji Yun when he entered. He rubbed his hands and smiled. Are you planning to sleep? He even used his finger to tease Qin Yining's long hair that had fallen over his shoulder. Qin Yining smiled and said, I thought you would be very busy tonight. Moreover, according to the rules, you shouldn't. How can there be so many rules? His large hand pulled her towards the bedchamber. In the future, I will come back to sleep. Remember to leave the door open for me. Qin Yining raised his head and looked at him in surprise. This is against the rules. Rules are set by people. Tomorrow, I will be the emperor. I am the most powerful person in the world. If I say that I want to sleep in Cunning Palace tonight, who dares to say no? You. Imperial Censor Yen, when the time comes, what's there to be afraid of? Pang Zhao's heart clenched when he saw Qin Yining's red eyes. He had just finished fighting a war and was used to cursing with the ruffians. This time, he was also brought out. If anyone dares to criticize me, I will let the Tiger Army directly destroy them. It just so happens that my brothers are all ready to go. Qin Yining was speechless for a moment when he heard this, but his heart suddenly brightened. Regardless of whether Pang Xiao would enrich the harem or not, she liked his current attitude. Stop fooling around. The throne has always been subject to criticism. If you continue to be a maverick, I'm afraid that people will not be convinced in the future. Not convinced. I will lead the army to beat him to death. Pang Xiao sat on the edge of the bed and pulled Qin Yining's wrist. Qin Yining was caught off guard and turned around. His long hair flew as he sat on Pang Zhao's lap. Ji Yun and Bing Tang hurriedly retreated. Qin Yining's face was red as he struggled, but he could not break free at all. Pang Xiao hugged Qin Yining's waist. The two of them had not been intimate for the past few days. Now that Qin Yining was in his arms, he was naturally a little restless. He hugged her with his large hands and said with a smile, Don't move. We still have to wake up early tomorrow. I'm afraid that I won't be able to sleep in the middle of the night if I stir up. If that happens, I'll have dark circles under my eyes and people will think that I'm not brave. Qin Yining carefully shifted his seat to avoid Pang Xiao. He blushed and said helplessly, All right, stop fooling around. Since you know that we have to wake up early, why are you still fooling around? From Pang Zhao's angle, Qin Yining's fair and exquisite earlobes and slender and fair neck were as soft as the snow that had just fallen. He could not help but want to taste them. However, what he said just now was the truth. He was really afraid that things would get out of hand and delay tomorrow's important matters. Pang Xiao stood up helplessly and pinched her little butt. All right, let's stop fooling around. I'll wash my face and quickly go to sleep. The abdication ceremony will be held early in the morning tomorrow. After the sky is bright, there will be the Empress coronation ceremony. I've already asked someone to hurry up with your gown. The hair ornaments and hair accessories will be sent over tomorrow. Dress up well and let them see what it means to be devastatingly beautiful. Otherwise, those people will have crooked thoughts and keep trying to push their own daughters over. TSK, they have no shame. With that, Peng Xiao took off his outer robe and went to the bathroom. Qin Yining stood in a daze. His last sentence just now gave Qin Yining some hope. The two of them slept in each other's arms. Qin Yining slept warmly and soundly that night. She curled up in Peng Xiao's arms and stuffed her feet between his calves. Even her feet, which were the most susceptible to cold, did not feel cold. Peng Xiao got up early. He did not want to disturb Qin Yining. He tiptoed to the bathroom with his clothes in his arms to familiarize himself with her appearance and hurriedly went to the front. Qin Yining slept until 5:45 in the morning before he was woken up by Ji Yun and Bing Tang. The two of them swept away yesterday's decadence and brought the palace maids who were good at combing and dressing to serve Qin Yining. Qin Yining's long hair was tied up high, revealing his slender neck. There was a golden hairpin on his head, which was fixed in place by a peony, followed by a golden phoenix hairpin. There were 3 pairs of golden tassels with pearls in the mouth of the phoenix, and similarly exquisite earrings on his ears. His makeup was a rare beauty. Paired with the tailored phoenix robe, even the palace maids who were dressing him were dazed. Wang Fei's wedding day was not like today. Bing Tang could not find a suitable description. It was not that she was not beautiful in the past, but the aura around Qin Yining today was something he had never seen before. Qin Yining smiled and pursed her lips at herself in the mirror. Her red lips were intense and made her skin appear even whiter. The palace maids decorated the space between her brows with a red flower. The exquisite 3-petaled peacock plume was small and unique. Other than the heroic aura, there was also a bone-chilling charm. The palace maids outside the door had been waiting for a long time. The shoulder bag was ready. Qin Yining walked out the door in the gold cloak that was illuminated by the red light outside. Stepping on the cleaned floor tiles, he sat on the shoulder bag. None of the palace maids dared to take an extra look. Last night, the palace maid who had been chased out of Kunning Palace was said to have sowed discord behind the scenes to sow discord between the emperor and empress. Even now, they still felt it was terrifying and inconceivable. When Qin Yining and his entourage arrived in front of Feng Tian Palace, the abdication ceremony had already ended. The civil and military officials stood in great numbers on the square. A biting cold wind blew past, so cold that it reached the bone. But no one moved. The banners fluttered, and golden waves surged from the imperial canopy. From Feng Tian Palace to the royal steps, the red carpet extended into a patch of golden light. It seemed to indicate that her future was bright and red. Following the rites officials' loud announcement, palace maids immediately came forward and respectfully indicated that Qin Yining could come forward. Qin Yining walked forward. The robe embroidered with golden phoenix wings fluttered on the red carpet. Behind him, the female officials and palace maids raised the imperial canopy. A long line of ceremonial guards followed behind. There was an official's unique voice that confidently announced that the empress had accompanied the emperor for many years. She had helped with disasters, helped the poor, helped the common people, raised food during the Taiden expeditions, and had never left him even after several life-and-death situations. Peng Xiao was dressed in a formal robe with 12 patterns of red cloud embroidery. He wore a black muslin winged crown on his head. It made his face seem like jade, and his bearing was like a dragon and a phoenix. No one expected that as Qin Yining gradually approached, he would stand and slowly walk down the royal steps. The civil and military officials saw this and couldn't help but be shocked. Qin Yining raised his head to look at the man walking towards him on the royal steps. He was not surprised. The head of the military officials, Ji Ziyu, Huzi, and the deputy generals beside Peng Xiao, as well as the head of the civil officials, Xiaoyu, Su Weiji, and the other strategists all widened their eyes in shock. Pang Shao stood in front of Qin Yining. He extended a hand and smiled. Qin Yining was slightly hesitant. Pang Shao's actions were probably against the rules, right? Pang Shao seemed to know Qin Yining's concerns. He grabbed her hand and led her up the royal steps. In the eyes of the bystanders, the new emperor's actions were like he was afraid that the empress would run away if she did not agree. This caused the officials to be speechless. Some of the generals who were familiar with Pang Shao's army laughed. Qin Yining stood in front of Pang Shao with a red face. Pang Shao also lowered his head to look at her. He took the conferring edict from Chief Eunuch Lu Anfu and handed it to the eunuch who was reading it. Qin Yining was about to kneel on the ground according to etiquette. However, as soon as he moved, Pang Shao immediately grabbed his arms. Chapter 1199. Glory and splendor. Qin Yining's red lips were slightly pursed. Her heart was beating so fast that it seemed like she wanted to let Pang Shao, who was closest to her, hear it. She struggled again. In such an important situation, according to etiquette, she had to kneel down to receive the edict. However, Pang Shao still held on to her with one hand. He didn't use enough strength to hurt her, but he still refused to let go. He forcibly held her arm to stop her from moving, and with his other hand, he took the imperial edict and stuffed it into her hand. Sister Yi, the country is vast. Will you walk side by side with me? Qin Yining's pupils instantly shrank. Pang Shao, who had just been humiliated, still claimed to be me and treated her the same as before. He didn't allow her to kneel in front of the officials to receive the edict with a status lower than his. Instead, he allowed her to walk side by side with the country. Qin Yining had mixed feelings for a moment. It was as if all her worries after entering the palace had become a joke. Pang Shao saw that she was in a daze, so he held her hand and shook it. Just as he was about to speak, an imperial censor among the officials stood out and loudly said, "Emperor, this official feels that it's inappropriate. The empress is a woman." Before he finished speaking, Pang Shao waved his hand. He had a smile on his face, but his voice was powerful. Did Jin delay the court? Did I not care about the hardships of the people and covet pleasure? Or did I only listen to those close to me and distance myself from the virtuous officials? That imperial censor was speechless for a moment. Even the other officials had a shocked expression. They had probably never seen an emperor who directly argued with an imperial censor on the first day of his ascension. Without waiting for the imperial censor to speak, Pang Shao said, "It's a good thing to speak out and advise. In the future, Jin will be honest and accept the advice. However, how Jin wants to treat the empress is Jin's family matter. It has nothing to do with the court. Don't mention it again in the future. Emperor, favoring the imperial harem so much, I'm afraid it won't benefit the court. You have to know that there have been foreign relatives causing chaos since ancient times. Then wait until you see the empress conniving with the foreign relatives before you come to remonstrate." Pang Shao had been holding Qin Yining's hand all along. He said loudly, "Jin was born in the army. From the beginning to the end, Jin only has one thought, which is to let the people of the world live in peace, have food to eat, children to go to school, and the elderly to be taken care of. Jin will not say any high-sounding words. Jin will only use swift and decisive methods to solve problems." Today, all the officials gathered here are wholeheartedly thinking for the country and the people of Northern Ji. I can understand your concerns, but there is still a long way to go. Let's wait and see. The current emperor was so unyielding and showed his strength without doing anything. Everyone couldn't help but think of the 100,000 tiger army stationed not far from the capital and the southern pacifying army in the south. This was not a soft lord. He was the emperor who truly held the military power in his hands and was supported by the people of the world. Not to mention the courtiers who wanted to scheme against him. The hairs on their backs stood up the moment they thought of doing so. This was someone who could really kill people with just a glare. The 10th year of Xingqiang came to an end. After a short period of time to restore the country of Northern Ji, a new dynasty was finally established. It was named Xan, and the new year was the first year of the new calendar. After the coronation ceremony, the courtiers dispersed. Qin Yining handed the Empress's golden book and golden treasures to Ziyuan behind him. He smiled and said to Pang Xiao, "I'll go back first." Pang Xiao, however, held her hand and didn't let go. He smiled and said, "There's no hurry. Accompany me to the imperial study first." Qin Yining was happy. He also knew Pang Xiao's intention, but he still persuaded, the rules still have to be followed. "I can't go beyond the rules. Moreover, the emperor should call himself Jin in front of me. The rules were set by me. Why did I decide to fight for the country in the first place?" Qin Yining was speechless. Pang Xiao's eyes were gentle. He took her hand and kissed it. Qin Yining was so shocked that she immediately wanted to withdraw her hand, but she couldn't. "Silly girl, it's only been a few years. How can I forget what it was for in the first place? I just want to grow old with you without hindrance. I want our family to be safe and not be disturbed by others. I don't want you and the children to live in fear. Now that I've finally ascended to this position, can I not give you what I wanted to give you in the first place? Then why did I spend so much effort to do such a tiring job?" Qin Yining lowered her eyes. Her heart was shaken again. Pang Xiao looked down at her long eyelashes. He smiled and raised his hand to pull out a large hairpin with a pearl in its mouth that was inserted diagonally on both sides of her bun. He shook it and then frowned and said, "So heavy. I'm afraid that your neck will be crushed. Why don't you go back and change your clothes first? I'll wait for you." Qin Yining was speechless. His thoughtfulness made her feel funny and helpless. The palace attendants on the side were all startled awake again. Yesterday, a palace maid had been sent away from the palace of earthly tranquility. It was said that she had wanted to seduce the emperor and had caused an unexpected disaster. Today, at the Empress coronation ceremony, the Son of Heaven's every action made it clear that the Empress was the most important person to the Son of Heaven. They couldn't defend the Son of Heaven, and they couldn't defend the Empress. It was clear at a glance what these people should do and shouldn't do in the future. Huzi was now the commander of the imperial bodyguards. Tang Xiu was the commander of the Golden Scale Guards. The two were not far away. Seeing that Pang Xiao's attitude towards Qin Yining hadn't changed, the two couldn't help but smile. The person they followed hadn't changed from beginning to end. The furnishings of the imperial study had changed. Pang Xiao didn't sit behind the desk. Instead, he waited for Qin Yining to come over after she had changed into a bright red palace robe. He sat with her on the heated kong by the window. Xiaoyu, Su Weiji, and the other strategists who often followed Pang Xiao gathered here with Huzi and Tang Xiu. Everyone came forward and bowed. "This subject greets the Emperor and the Empress." Pang Xiao smiled and said, "No need for formalities. Gentlemen, please sit." The great Taijian Luanfu immediately led the palace attendants to quickly serve hot tea and snacks. He also carefully wrapped an exquisite brass hand warmer in a golden tea bag and carefully handed it to the Empress. Qin Yining smiled and nodded at him. Luanfu's heart immediately soared. Satisfied, he left with the palace attendants. Xiaoyu and Su Weiji looked at each other. It seemed that after today, everyone understood the position of the Empress. They could refuse to give the hand warmer to the Son of Heaven, but they couldn't refuse to give it to the Empress. Pang Xiao smiled and said, "Today, I have summoned everyone here to discuss the whereabouts of the previous dynasty's imperial prince Zhou Lian. Outsiders don't know, but we know behind closed doors. Zhou Lian is actually the previous dynasty's imperial princess Zhou Xiaolian that the empress saved. He has been by the empress' side all these years. Yes. Everyone nodded. The people by Pang Zhao's side all had their own rewards. These strategists all had positions in the 6 ministries and were all 3rd or 4th rank. For example, Xiaoyu and Su Weiji had entered the Ministry of Rights and were only 1 step away from entering the cabinet. Therefore, everyone was not as casual as before when they spoke. Their words were very careful. Chapter 1200. Yes, Emperor, Official Wu's words are reasonable. This subject also thinks that this person cannot be left alive. It was not easy for Emperor to ascend to this position. We cannot leave any hidden dangers that could threaten the stability of the country. With 2 of them taking the lead, the other ministers began to speak freely, but they only had one thought in mind. They wanted Lian Xiaozhou's life. Qin Yining lowered her head and did not immediately interrupt. Even though Pang Xiao had just established her status and authority in front of everyone, Qin Yining knew that this world did not allow women to interfere in the affairs of the previous dynasty. It was her good fortune that Pang Xiao cared for her, but she could not overstep her boundaries and make things difficult for Pang Xiao. There was a limit to a person's patience, and people could change at any time. Right now, Pang Xiao cared for her. No matter what she did, it was cute and natural in his eyes. But what if one day his feelings faded? It wasn't that she did not believe in Pang Xiao, but she had seen through human nature. Right now, what she needed to do was to delay this change as much as possible. Pang Xiao allowed the officials to speak freely. Then he looked at Su Weiji and Xiaoyu. What about the 2 sirs? Su Weiji looked at Qin Yining, who was silent with lowered eyes. After a moment of thought, he said, "This subject thinks that leaving this person alive is a hidden danger. But she has followed the Empress since she was very young. This time, it was because of the Empress' persuasion that she was willing to cooperate with Emperor. If we kill the donkey after it has left the millstone, I'm afraid that people will talk about it. Also, it will be hard for her to feel at ease." Yes. Xiaoyu also said, in this subject's view, Lian Xiaozhou has never thought of herself as a princess of the previous dynasty. She is content with her present life. It is only because the Empress is close to her that she agreed to help. If she is killed like this, the Empress will not be able to accept it. Pang Xiao looked at Qin Yining. His large hand squeezed her hand and shook it, his finger secretly scratching her palm. Qin Yining's uneasiness finally eased a little after seeing Pang Zhao's actions. When the other officials saw Pang Zhao's reaction, they knew that the emperor might not want to kill this person. "Your Majesty, if we don't kill him, we have to think of a way to keep him under our control to avoid future troubles." Official Wu suddenly had an idea. His Majesty has just ascended to the throne, so he must fill up the harem every year. It's not a bad idea to take her into the harem and confer her the title of concubine. This way, she will be under the control of His Majesty and Empress. Once a woman gets married, her mind will be on how to live a good life in the harem. In addition, His Majesty is extraordinary and has a noble status, so how can any woman resist? In this way, not only would I not have to bear the crime of cooking the hounds after they've outlived their usefulness, I would also be able to successfully control them. Isn't this killing 2 birds with 1 stone? Lord Wu stroked his long beard as he spoke. He was obviously very pleased with his idea. The strategists beside him also nodded in agreement. They all want to expand their harem. Isn't it the same no matter who it is? Her status as a princess of the previous dynasty can be considered worthy of His Majesty, so it's not a bad bargain. Pang Xiao looked at the crowd with a shadow of a smile and did not express his opinion. Xiaoyu and Su Weiji looked at the empress who had her head lowered, and then looked at the emperor's angry face. They sighed inside again. The emperor's fondness for the empress had never changed. Now that he had ascended to the throne, he was still unhappy when the topic of filling up the harem was brought up. They couldn't help but start to worry. The person in front of them was like this. What would happen when it was time for the selection of consorts? Xiaoyu sighed. It was instinctive to guess the emperor's intentions. He immediately stopped the discussion and asked, "Does His Majesty already have an idea?" Everyone's hearts shook and they slowly stopped talking. The Son of Heaven said that he had come to discuss matters with them, but if the Son of Heaven really had his own plans, if they continued to criticize him, it would leave a bad impression. Also, the one in front of them was a decisive person. Their reverence for an emperor like this was always hidden in their hearts. No matter how much they said, the final decision was made by the emperor. It was a harmless matter, so why should they take it seriously? With such a change in thinking, no one said anything more and calmed down. Pang Shao achieved his goal and smiled. Jin does have an idea. After investigation, Jin found that this woman always has one or two people who are in love with her. This person is also Jin's good friend, Mu Gongzi's disciple. Mu Gongzi has protected him several times and is Jin's friend. If the previous dynasty's Gongzi is betrothed to Mu Gongzi's disciple, there is no need to worry. What does everyone think? Everyone was silent. It seemed that the Son of Heaven had already thought of this. Qin Yining raised his head in surprise. Are you talking about Fang Gongzi? Hearing the Empress directly call the Son of Heaven, you, the officials couldn't help but inwardly click their tongues, but no one dared to speak. After all, the Emperor seemed to enjoy being called this by the Empress. Pang Shao nodded. It's that Fang Gongzi. So you know about this? Yes. Little Kanji has been by my side for a long time, so I naturally know some things. It's just that after I went to pick up little Kanji, we parted ways with that Fang Gongzi. At that time, I didn't see Fang Gongzi's feelings for little Kanji. Qin Yining said with some worry, I'm worried about little Kanji marrying over. What if the other party isn't sincere? Pang Shao smiled and said, you don't have to worry about this. A while ago, they discovered that there was someone secretly protecting Zhou Xiaolian. Blockhead personally went out and caught that person. Only then did I know that this person had been protecting Zhou Xiaolian from the moment you left. It's just that he didn't show himself. There was such a thing. Qin Yining's eyes widened in shock. Of course, the reason why I had this idea was because after discovering this matter, the Empress will hide in seclusion. In the future, the husband and wife could live in seclusion in the sect. With Blockhead there, they could let the two lovers get married, and they wouldn't have to worry about their secret being leaked. Wouldn't that be good? What's more, Pang Shao raised his head and smiled confidently. Could it be that there are rumors that can shake the current state? Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but admit that Pang Shao wasn't lying. With powerful soldiers in his hands and the world's expectations, Pang Shao's state really wasn't that easy to shake. What's more, it was just some rumors. It was hard to say who would believe it and who wouldn't. Xia Yu and Su Weiji now completely understood that the current emperor was arbitrary. However, they couldn't find any words to refute because Pang Shao's words were indeed feasible. Moreover, the principles that Pang Shao insisted on had always existed. It didn't change just because he became the emperor. This really made the people who followed him feel comforted. Following a person who was affectionate and righteous was better than following that ungrateful person like Li Qitian. Xia Yu and Su Weiji took the lead and nodded. Your Majesty's method is just right. Official Wu and the others also tactfully nodded and didn't dare to speak nonsense to show off. Pang Shao smiled and said, since that's the case, Jin will bestow a marriage for them later. He turned to Qin Yining, you should also prepare a generous dowry for her. Qin Yining was overjoyed and nodded repeatedly. Good, leave this matter to me. That's right, regarding Ji Yun and Bing Tang's good news, how about asking your majesty to say something and bestow them with grace? Chapter 1201. Looking at the loving emperor and empress, no matter how slow the officials present were, they completely understood the emperor's intentions in summoning them today. The emperor had summoned them not to discuss how to deal with the princes of the previous dynasty, but to use this matter to tactfully let them know what the emperor's attitude towards the people and matters related to the empress was. They would also have a plan and not do unnecessary things in the future. They had all followed Pang Xiao for a long time and had a certain understanding of Pang Xiao. They knew that this person had an iron fist, had a plan, and was loyal. Thinking about today's matter, from beginning to end, the emperor had shown great respect and love for the empress. It was not that the previous dynasty's princess could not be killed, but that he could not kill her out of consideration for the empress' feelings. Just as Pang Xiao had said, Zhou Xiaolian had been by the empress' side ever since she was rescued. Just now, they were anxious to show off. Some said that they wanted to kill her, and some even said that they wanted the emperor to bring Zhou Xiaolian into the harem. Looking at the emperor's attitude now, their eagerness to show off, their actions were clearly very stupid. The officials understood, and so did Qin Yining. From the start of the coronation ceremony, Pang Xiao had been working hard to give her more importance. He used his actions to tell everyone his attitude. Qin Yining's nervousness, pessimism, and loneliness before entering the palace were all thrown to the back of his mind. No matter what happened in the future, at least Pang Xiao did not disappoint her. Your Majesty's decree for marriage was quickly arranged by the great Taijian Lu and Huzi and Bing Tang, Tang Xiu, and Ji Yun all received the decree. Lian Xiaozhou was arranged to live outside the palace. Even Qin Yining did not know where she lived. Pang Xiao only arranged for people close to him to go with Mu Jinghu to convey the message. Lian Xiaozhou was wearing a plain dress. When she heard the contents of the decree, a layer of red rose to her face. She lowered her head and did not dare to look at Fong Hailing standing next to her. Fong Hailing's entire body was tense. She lowered her head and did not accept the decree for a while. Mu Jinghu asked doubtfully, "You're not willing?" Fong Hailing looked up and shook her head after a long while. No, it's just that I'm a little surprised." Accident. Mu Jinghu was even more confused. Fong Hailing said bluntly, "I was ready to take her and wander the world. In less than 3 days, there would be assassins coming. With her status, how can the higher-ups tolerate her?" Mu Jinghu chuckled and shook his head. "You're thinking too much. In the future, you husband and wife can live in heaven's secret valley with peace of mind. Don't leave the valley if there is nothing. Moreover, the emperor and the empress are not the kind of people you think they are. Your wife is the empress' younger sister, why would the emperor kill her?" Fong Hailing was still in disbelief. Lian Xiaozhou nodded, "Sister won't harm me. Even if someone wants to kill me to get rid of future troubles, big sister will protect me. But your sister is still a woman." Fong Hailing had a headache over Lian Xiaozhou's naivety. If the emperor gives the decree, what can she do? The emperor loves big sister and will not disregard big sister's wishes. Moreover, if the emperor really wanted to kill me, he could have secretly killed me when he got the imperial jade seal. How could he allow me to eat and wear well by big sister's side for so many years? Mu Jinghu nodded his head repeatedly. Even Fong Hailing was a little speechless. Indeed, even when Pang Xiao was not the emperor, he was still Wang Yi who had many capable subordinates. If he really wanted to kill Lian Xiaozhou, there were many ways to secretly order people to do it. He could also perfectly hide it from Qin Yining. Not to mention other things, they had experienced so many difficulties and dangers in the past. At the critical moment of life and death, it was not strange for one or two people to die by their side. If they were afraid that they would not be able to explain it to Qin Yining, they could just push all the blame to the enemy. Fang Hailing was relieved. She turned to look at Lian Xiaozhou. Seeing her rosy cheeks, she blushed and said stiffly, "Then that's it." Mu Jinghu raised his eyebrows. Lian Xiaozhou's face turned even redder. She lowered her head and said, "Then that's it." Mu Jinghu found it funny. He remembered how he felt when he kidnapped Xiao Feishan and brought her back. Combined with the two people in front of him now, he could not help but feel emotional. Everyone had a good home. It was time for him to go home. Kunning Palace. The relatives and friends of the emperor and empress were gathered together. A round table was set up in the middle of the room. The dishes were all prepared and the two families sat together. The palace servants had already been ordered to leave. Brother Zhao and Brother Han sat on the left and right of Qin Yining. The wet nurse was holding Sister Yun and Brother Xian, who had just turned a year old, to accompany them. Yao Qinggu and Madame Ma sat at the head of the table. Empress Dowager Yao sat on the left. Qin Huaiyuan, the Sun Clan, and Chao Yuqing sat on the right. Brother Han mischievously pulled Qin Yining's sleeve for a while, and then pulled the jade pendant on Chao Yuqing's waist. Brother Zhao's face was taut, and he looked deep. Pang Xiao picked up the wine pot and personally filled everyone's cups. Today's reunion is all thanks to father-in-law's care. If not for father-in-law's arrangements at Shiyu, the urgent matter on that day would have made it difficult even if the family went. Pang Xiao raised his cup with both hands. "Father-in-law, your son-in-law salutes you." Qin Huaiyuan smiled and picked up his cup. He stood up and clinked his cup with Pang Xiao's. Pang Xiao hurriedly bowed. His attitude was extremely humble. Qin Huaiyuan respected his identity as the emperor, and he respected Qin Huaiyuan even more. Seeing Pang Xiao being so respectful, Empress Dowager Yao didn't like it. She coughed and said, We're all family, why be like this? Emperor, quickly sit down. Now that you're the emperor, you should act like an emperor." Before she could finish, she was interrupted by Madame Ma's cough. "Even if Dai Fu becomes the emperor, is he not your son? What is mother saying?" Empress Dowager Yao lost some face and touched the golden hairpin behind her head. "Since he's the emperor, he's your son. Is Dai Fu not the son-in-law of your in-law after becoming the emperor? Don't use your crooked thoughts to mess around, you won't lose face." Empress Dowager Yao's face turned green and white. She didn't think that even though she was the Empress Dowager, Madame Ma would still act like this. She didn't leave her any face in front of others. Pang Xiao pretended not to notice the Yao clan's expression. He said with a smile, "Father-in-law, mother-in-law, when the situation wasn't good before, I always caused you to suffer. Now that I can finally break free from those shackles, I don't have to live in fear anymore. I can show filial piety to my elders in the future. There are already people rebuilding the residence outside the palace. For the next few days, you can temporarily stay in the palace. When the outside of the residence is finished, you can rebuild the family Qin." The Sun clan nodded with a smile and didn't say anything. There was a bit of sadness in their eyes. Qin Huaiyuan looked at Qin Yining on the side and said with a smile, "I understand the emperor's good intentions. It's just that at today's family banquet, I also have to say goodbye to the emperor." "Father." Qin Yining turned pale with fright. "Why do you have to say goodbye? Now that the world has settled down, we don't have to worry about being framed. In the future, this daughter can show filial piety to my parents. Isn't it good to have a family reunion? I already had someone tell Mr. Liao to prepare to go to Shiyu to pick up old madam and second uncle. Sister E." Qin Huaiyuan gently smiled and softly interrupted her, now that you are the empress and the mother of 4 children, how can you still be like a child? These words weren't reproach, but rather pampering. Qin Yining's eyes immediately became wet. Qin Huayuan said with a smile, just like father said, you are the empress, so you have to be the mother of the world. You have to help your husband and children, govern the 6 palaces, and be the role model for all the women in the world. Standing in this position, you have to bear stricter constraints than before. If you take half a step wrong, do you know how many eyes will be watching you? Daughter knows. Qin Yining lowered her head. Everyone at the table also quietly looked at Qin Huayuan. Qin Huayuan smiled, his eyes full of love and determination. Since you and the emperor met, how many dangers have you experienced? You were able to survive and still have the same feelings. This is your good fortune and heaven's favor. Thinking of the ups and downs Qin Yining and Pang Xiao had gone through, everyone was moved. The Sun clan felt distressed for their daughter and lowered their heads to wipe the corners of their eyes. Madame Ma also felt distressed and tightly knitted her brows. Even the Yao clan couldn't bear it. You and your husband have a good relationship, which is a blessing. Now that the emperor is stepping on the throne and everything is new, the court affairs have just been placed on your shoulders, and the sharpness of the battlefield has not yet faded. The officials and subordinates are still afraid of you, so no one dares to say much about what you are doing now. But as time passes, the peaceful days will erase people's memories. When they gradually forget your spirit and sharpness, as long as the emperor's every move is slightly inappropriate, it will lead to the censor's condemnation. Father-in-law, I can take care of all these. Pang Xiao firmly promised. Qin Huayuan smiled and nodded, I believe the emperor can take care of it. I also believe that the emperor now likes Sister Yi, owes her, has feelings for her, and also has familial affection. But if it is like this 1 year, what about 10 years later? 20 years later, 30 years later? Pang Xiao's expression immediately changed, and her phoenix eyes were full of anxiety. Qin Huayuan calmly smiled and waved his hand, indicating Pang Xiao to calm down. No one can predict what will happen in the court in the future. The emperor is the son of heaven, and he can hide from the selection of concubines for a year, but what about the years after? Moreover, you and I both know that the most stable way to win over the people and court officials is through marriage. In the future, there will definitely be many things that will force the emperor to have no choice but to expand the harem. Moreover, as the emperor, it is normal for him to have 3 palaces and 6 courtyards in order to spread his bloodline. If the emperor doesn't do this, there will be officials who will constantly admonish him. Sister Yi is my daughter, and I know her temperament the best. She has been lonely since she was a child, and she was born in a chaotic world. Very few people have shown her sincerity, so she especially cherishes the feeling she can get, whether it is familial affection, friendship, or love. She has known the emperor for a long time, so she naturally trusts him with her sincerity. She is a smart person, but she has put herself in danger time and time again for the emperor. Is this love true? This kind of love can't be ignored. Father-in-law. Your Majesty. Qin Huayuan stood up and said with a smile, as a man, as a person who understands the art of politics, I can believe in the emperor's promise, but I am also worried. It wasn't easy to devote one's heart and soul to one person for the rest of their lives. Even if you can do it, the conditions of the outside world will always force you. Of course, with Sister Yi's intelligence, she is smart enough to be the female prime minister, so I believe she can survive the struggle in the harem. However, just because she can win, it doesn't mean she won't be sad. Chapter 1202. Qin Huayuan waved his hand. I understand the emperor's intentions, but an emotional guarantee is the most unreliable guarantee in the world. I'm not doubting the emperor, but human nature is like this. If Sister E is hurt in the future and doesn't want to be a caged sparrow in the harem, she won't be bothered to deal with the other women around the emperor. She won't even have a family to go back to. Qin Yining heard this and closed her eyes. Her tears couldn't help but flow out. Qin Huayuan continued, "It's not that I don't love the vast land, and it's not that I don't understand the inconvenience and hardships of life in Shiyu. But I am a father. The way I love my daughter is to give her a family she can go back to. Shiyu's terrain is dangerous and there are large amounts of resources that can be developed. It's not impossible for it to become the overlord of the desert in the future. If my daughter wants to go home, I will take her back. Even if she leaves you, I can let my daughter live a good life. Even if you have millions of soldiers, the desert is a natural barrier, and you don't have a guide. You may not be able to get any benefits in Shiyu. In-law." When Madame Ma heard the killing intent in Qin Huayuan's words, she couldn't help but feel anxious. Empress Dowager Yao sharply said, "You're too rude to speak like this. Are you putting the current emperor in your eyes?" Qin Huayuan's smile was still as strong as before. "This old man has guarded the etiquette between a ruler and a minister for my entire life. How could I not understand? I'm speaking to my daughter and son-in-law as a father." After saying this, Qin Huayuan walked in front of Qin Yining. Qin Yining stood up and looked up at her father. Her father's large hand fell on her temples and then pinched her cheeks. "Silly girl, you don't need to worry or panic. Just stay here and live peacefully with the emperor. In the future, if someone hurts your heart and makes you feel that your love has come to an end, that your family can't be maintained, or that there's no hope in the harem, you don't need to feel despair. You don't need to foolishly stay on an isolated island. Father and your mother will be in the desert. If you're unhappy, you can go home." Qin Yining closed her eyes and tears fell like rain. "Father. Good boy. Good girl." Qin Huayuan also had tears in his eyes. Because if they were to part today and meet again in the future, it wouldn't be as simple as stepping out of one door or entering another. However, they had been traveling non-stop, and the number of days they could see each other every year could be counted on one's fingers. How many years do I have left in this life? However, the time they spent together as father and daughter was probably less than a year. This was the sorrow of every parent. But he couldn't disregard his child's future just for the sake of reuniting. The members of the Sun clan came forward and sobbed as they hugged Qin Yining. "Sister E, my son. Mother, can you not leave? Father, I understand what you mean and what you're worried about. But I promise that I'm not that weak. Can you stay in the capital?" Qin Huayuan just shook his head with a smile. The Sun clan member sobbed and whispered into Qin Yining's ear, "Your father is right. You must have a way out." "I won't. I came back home when I was 14 years old, and we've only known each other for 8 years. How many days have I spent by your side during these 8 years of wandering about in a miserable state? If you leave now, you'll have a long road ahead. How many more days can we see each other in this life? It wasn't easy for me to grit my teeth and persevere until now because I want to be with you without any scruples in the future. No one can harm our family anymore. Why can't I do something as simple as this?" Qin Yining hugged the Sun clan member and sobbed. Her voice changed as she cried, and she couldn't help but stomp her feet in dissatisfaction. The Sun clan member closed her eyes and cried even louder. Seeing their mother like this, Brother Zhao and Brother Han also shed tears. Pang Xiao had never seen Qin Yining so sad. He patted her shoulder to comfort her, but he didn't know what to say or do. He only felt helpless. At this moment, even if he gave his heart out, he couldn't stop Qin Huayuan. This was because from Qin Huayuan's point of view, everything he considered was reasonable and well-founded. He wanted to separate from Qin Yining, not because he didn't love his daughter, but because he loved her too much. He would rather work hard in the desert to give Qin Yining a backer. Such fatherly love made Pang Xiao feel emotional and envious, but he also felt helpless. Now that he was in this position, his father-in-law, who treated him like a teacher and a father, could no longer fully trust his feelings for Qin Yining. Mrs. Ma was already in tears. She got up and put her arm around Qin Yining's shoulder. "Little E, don't cry. Your parents are doing this for you. I know you're sad, but if you're like this, won't your parents be even sadder? As parents, we're all doing this for our children. You're a mother, so you should know that your parents have already made up their minds." Qin Yining's eyes were red and swollen from crying. She lowered her head and nodded after a long while. Seeing Zhao Gu and Han Gu hugging her legs on both sides, she touched her children's heads with tears streaming down her face. Han Gu looked up at Qin Yining and said, "Mother, don't cry. If anyone bullies you in the future, I'll beat them to death." Qin Yining couldn't help but chuckle when he heard those childish words. However, Zhao Gu put on a serious face and said, "That's not right. What if grandmother bullies mother? What if father bullies mother? What if father's concubine bullies mother in the future? Can you beat them to death one by one?" Han Gu's eyes widened and he was suddenly stumped. It seemed a little inappropriate to beat his own grandmother and father to death. Zhao Gu took 2 steps back, then gave Qin Yining and Pang Xiao a big bow with his small body. "Father, mother, Zhao Gu wants to go to Xia with grandfather." Pang Xiao and Qin Yining turned pale with fright. "Zhao Gu, why do you say that? Don't you like being by father and mother's side?" Qin Yining's hands and feet were cold. She didn't personally take care of the children since they were young. She always felt guilty and worried that the children wouldn't want to be close to her. Now that Zhao Gu said he wanted to go to Xia, how could she be willing? Zhao Gu's childish voice was sonorous and powerful as he said, "Nyangqin, I am an adult." When grandfather taught the strategy for War of the Nation, he mentioned that it was Master Zhua who advised Empress Dowager Zhao. Empress Dowager Zhao favored Lord Chang and gave him a generous salary, a fertile land, and an endless supply of jewels. In the beginning, she refused to give him a chance to make a name for himself. If a person didn't have any achievements, but had so many treasures, then that was what grandfather said, his virtue didn't match his position. No matter how much land and jewelry he has, it will be difficult to convince the public in the future. I know that I am Father Emperor's son. In the future, Father Emperor will have many sons. I like Xia very much, and I also like grandfather's teachings. Although it's good to be by father and mother's side, I don't want to be a useless person who is spoiled. I want to be the Emperor of Xia in the future. Everyone was stunned. No one would have thought that a 5-year-old child would say such words. The child tilted his head. It seemed that he wasn't used to speaking so much in one breath. His face was a little red, which made the small red mole between his eyebrows even brighter. However, he still maintained his kneeling posture. Although his body was small, it showed the tenacity of a sprout that had just broken through the soil. Right now we are so weak. If someone bullies mother, we can only send people to beat them up. But what if I am the Emperor of Xia? Zhao Gu bared his teeth at Empress Dowager Yao. "Grandmother, your son is the Emperor. My mother's son will also be the Emperor in the future. No one is weaker than the other." You. Empress Dowager Yao was so angry that she fell backwards. She couldn't quarrel with a child, so she could only fiercely grind her teeth. Zhao Gu was more sensitive than Han Gu. He always knew that their grandmother didn't like them. She often said some unpleasant words in front of them. What unknown origin, what confused bloodlines, and so on. Although he didn't know much, he knew that it wasn't anything good. Now that he saw his mother being bullied like this, and even his maternal grandfather and grandmother had to return to Xia, he also revealed his cold baby teeth. Empress Dowager Yao was angry, but the others didn't think so. Pang Shao first pursed his lips to hold back his laughter as he listened to the child's bold words. In the end, he actually laughed out loud and picked up the child. The child's serious and cold appearance was broken on the spot. "Father. Don't mess around. Ha ha ha." Pang Shao finally couldn't help but laugh. "Good, good, you are father's good son. You have ambition." Zhao Gui's face was red. Empress Dowager Yao's face was white with anger. Qin Yining stood in place helplessly, tightly holding the hands of the Sun Clan and Han Gu. Rationally, it was rare for a 5-year-old child to think so much. She felt that there was a certain reason. As parents, they shouldn't be too arbitrary and should respect their children. But emotionally, she was reluctant. After all, the child was still young. She couldn't bear to part with him. Qin Huaiyuan came forward with a smile and rubbed Zhao Gu's head with his big hand. "You've decided. Xia's scenery isn't as good as here. Perhaps the food here isn't as good as here. Moreover, you have to separate from Han Gu and your parents. What will you do if you miss them?" "I can write a letter." Zhao Gu said firmly. "There's nothing bad about Xia. It's easy to defend and hard to attack. Even if someone wants to attack us, grandfather can defend." Pang Shao loved this son to death. Wouldn't it be a pity if such an excellent child didn't inherit the throne? But he also knew that the reason why the child could have such thoughts at such a young age was all because of Qin Huaiyuan's good teaching. This child's talent was so high. If he stayed by his side, he was afraid that it would delay him. The originally sad atmosphere was disturbed by Zhao Gu. Qin Yining didn't know whether he should be sad that his parents wanted to return to Xia or sad that his child didn't want to stay. However, whether it was Qin Huaiyuan or Zhao Gu, they were both equally stubborn. Qin Yining couldn't stop either of them. After the banquet ended, she returned to her bedchamber and silently grieved. Zhao Gu and Han Gu held hands and hid in a corner to whisper. The two children didn't have the slightest bit of sadness or reluctance to part. Instead, they were like little foxes who succeeded in their schemes. Nyangqin is too easy to bully. I think that in the future, even if father doesn't take a concubine, grandmother will bully Nyangqin. I have to watch out. AI. The two children sighed in unison. I'll stay here with father and learn more martial arts from father, Uncle Ji, and Uncle Mu. You'll also learn more from grandfather and grandmother Chow. In the future, I'll teach you and you'll teach me. Let's exchange. I'll write more letters to you. I'll also write more letters to you. Zhao Gu nodded heavily. Han Gu stretched out his little finger, pinky swear. Chapter 1203. The children were very shrewd. Whether it was intelligence, knowledge, or physical strength, they were all far superior to their peers. But no matter how powerful they were still young. They didn't pay attention to their words and were all heard by Pang Shao and Huzi, who were hiding not far away. Huzi lowered his head and silently suppressed his laughter. The children's childish voices spoke like little adults. They were worried about the relationship between mother and daughter-in-law, and worried that their father would take a concubine to bully their mother. It was so cute that it made his heart itch. When could he and Bing Tang have such a lively and cute son? Pang Shao also didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Who would have thought that in their eyes, he was the kind of person who would bully his wife? However, Pang Shao wasn't angry because of this. Instead, he was reflecting on himself. The children lived with Qin Huaiyuan in Shiyu. They had only been reunited with the couple for a short time. There was no such thing as being biased towards their mother after being with her for a long time. So, he accounted for 80% of the reason why they had this kind of thinking. The two children didn't plan to go back immediately. Instead, they held hands and found a corner with no wind. They looked at the palace servant standing guard in the distance and whispered in each other's ears. "We just ate and mother was bullied until she cried. She didn't eat much." Zhao Guober lowered his head and pulled at the white rabbit fur on his sleeve with his fingers. Mother didn't cry because she was bullied. She cried because she was anxious. Grandfather said he wanted to leave. You also said you wanted to leave. Mother is the kind of person who wants the whole family to be together the most. Brother Han sighed like a little adult. But grandfather is a person who wants to do great things. You are also a person who wants to do great things. You can't always be with mother. Brother Han sighed and suddenly leaned close to Zhao Guober and whispered, "Actually, it's grandmother's fault." Whenever grandmother saw mother, she would pout and glare. The words she said were also unpleasant. She always said we were bastards. I heard that before we were born, mother was kidnapped and suffered a lot outside. So some people suspect that we aren't father's biological children. Really? Of course it's fake. We are father's biological children. Otherwise, father wouldn't like us so much. I don't know what grandmother is thinking. Why doesn't she like us? Seeing Brother Han's troubled frown, Brother Zhao shook his head. It must be because mother gave birth to a beautiful daughter. Grandmother is jealous of mother, so she doesn't like us. Pang Xiao, who was eavesdropping from a corner not far away, gradually darkened his face. His whole body was filled with anger. Seeing that Pang Xiao was really angry, Huzi was anxious. He was afraid that Pang Xiao would beat his son. After all, it was wrong for a young child to talk about his grandmother behind her back. However, Pang Xiao was not angry about this. How dare the Yao clan say such things in front of their children? He didn't know what the Yao clan and Yao Qinggu were thinking. He was the father of the children. How could he not know whether the children were his or not? However, the Yao clan insisted on this point. They insisted that the children's bloodline was impure and insisted on making him a cuckold. That wasn't all. They slandered Sister Yi and dared to say such things in front of the children. This was because the children had been taught well by Qin Huaiyuan and had their own judgment. If it was an ordinary child who was disliked by his biological grandmother and was always called a bastard, what kind of child would that child grow up to be? Moreover, a housewife who didn't see the big picture always said such strange things in front of the children. If the children were to follow her, what would they learn in the future? A gossipy woman. Pang Xiao clenched his fists, and his joints made cracking sounds. Although his expression couldn't be seen clearly in the night, the terrifying aura he exuded was hard to ignore. Huzi was worried and didn't know how to persuade him. However, Pang Xiao walked out of the shadows with large strides, and went straight to the two children. Zhao Guober and Han Guober were still whispering when they heard footsteps approaching. They immediately turned around and saw their biological father striding over. They looked up at their tall and mighty father. They felt as if they were standing under a mountain and felt an unprecedented pressure. The children nervously pursed their lips and even forgot to greet their father. When he got close, Pang Xiao asked, "Why don't you go back to Cunning Palace to rest?" "Father, we'll go back after talking for a while." Han Guober grinned and grabbed Pang Xiao's hand. Zhao Guober immediately grabbed Pang Xiao's other hand. He raised his head and said, "Father, is Nyingqin crying? Are you going to deal with court affairs and don't want to accompany mother?" Pang Xiao originally wanted to ask the two children, but before he could say anything, he was stumped by the question. He hadn't reacted before. Just now, Sister E was crying so sadly. Now that she was left alone, wouldn't she be even sadder? He originally wanted to accompany Qin Yining, but who would have thought that he would encounter the two children whispering and forget about it? Now, his expression turned cold. It's getting late, let's all go back. The children nodded together. When Pang Xiao raised his head and strode in the middle, Xiao Gu proudly winked at Han Gu from behind Pang Xiao. The beauty mole between his eyebrows set off his beautiful and delicate facial features, making him look a bit playful. Han Gu grinned and grabbed Pang Xiao's hand while moving his short legs to catch up with his father's pace. He anxiously said, "Father, if the Empress Dowager bullies Mother in the future, will you help your mother or my mother?" Pang Xiao choked and helplessly said, "I won't let your mother be wronged." "But Mother has always been wronged." Han Gu didn't seem to understand where Pang Xiao's confidence came from. They all said that even if Mother is the Empress in the future, she will still be controlled by the Empress Dowager. "My mother will do whatever the common people's daughter-in-law does." Also, the Empress Dowager also said that my mother feels guilty towards the Pang family, so everything she does is what she should do. "Father, what exactly is the guilt? Are we really not your sons like what the Empress Dowager said?" Pang Xiao suddenly stopped and lowered his head to look at Han Gu, who was looking up at him. Han Gu had a pair of eyes that were very similar to Qin Yining's. His eyes were big and bright, and when he smiled, the corners of his eyes curved, making him very pitiful. Han Gu didn't show any weakness despite being oppressed by his father's imperial majesty. He still tilted his head and looked at Pang Xiao. "Father, why aren't you talking?" Pang Xiao was silent for a moment before he said, "You are very smart. You also learned how to beat around the bush and complain about your grandmother in front of your father." "Of course not. Father knows everything. He doesn't need us to complain." Han Gu stuck out his tongue and pulled Xiao Gu's hand to run forward. The small body's speed wasn't slow. Pang Xiao looked at their backs, feeling both angry and amused. Han Gu was most likely mocking him just now. He knew everything, but he wasn't willing to help their mother vent her anger. The child was only 5 years old, but he already knew how to speak like this. Obviously, he had inherited his father-in-law's power. What would happen when he grew up like this? Pang Xiao's heart was a lot happier. At this time, he was incomparably grateful to Qin Huaiyuan for his efforts in raising his two children to be so sensible. They dared to speak in public, and they had their own ideas. They had the ability to think independently and didn't submit to other people's views. They could even quote the classics to explain their own point of view. They could also play tricks in front of their own father. This kind of child, even an ordinary adult might not be able to compare. Chapter 1204. At this time, Qin Yining had already washed up and changed into a half-new brocade collar. Her half-dried hair was draped over her shoulders and glowed under the orange light. Other than her slightly red and swollen eyes, there was no sign of the sadness from before. But even so, those who had followed her all year round knew that she was sad. Bing Tang and Ji Yun were very anxious. "We don't want to get married. Didn't we agree before that we will stay by your side in the future?" "That's right, what's so good about getting married? What nonsense are you saying?" Qin Yining held their hands. "Of course I welcome you to stay by my side. After you get married, you can still come into the palace to see me often. This won't delay our reunion. Don't tell me you want to be palace maids for the rest of your lives. What's wrong with being palace maids?" Qin Yining's white hand brushed Ji Yun's hair away from her temples. "All right, don't be impulsive and don't speak nonsense. In this life, we have to move forward and look forward. Even if we can't bear to let go of a stage, the next stage will come. You are all good girls. Now that Wang Yi and I have the ability, we will give you a good home. In the future, you can live your lives peacefully and happily. Isn't that better than being palace maids by my side? But, in the depths of the palace, how can there be a considerate person? Bing Tang sniffled and wiped away her tears. Qin Yining sighed helplessly, you have to get used to it. After you get married, you will have to live the rest of your lives under the same roof. You have to make your own decisions about the matters in the Fu. You have to learn how to get used to that kind of life. Fortunately, His Majesty and I are here. Huzi and Tang Xiu won't dare to bully you in secret. Ji Yun lowered her head and said, we have your Majesty's support, but what about you? Qin Yining smiled and used a handkerchief to wipe her tears. Me? Of course I have His Majesty's support. I still have a long life ahead of me. The road is paved by people. How can there be any obstacles that can't be overcome? You guys, don't worry about me. Don't tell me you really want to stay by my side and become old ladies. What's more, His Majesty has already decreed for you to choose a date to get married. How can you defy an imperial edict? Bing Tang and Ji Yun also knew these principles, but their hearts were empty. They were about to enter a new life. They were confused and reluctant. Qin Yining took their hands and shook them, one on the left and the other on the right. Well, don't worry. I've asked people to prepare a house and a generous dowry for you. I've also asked people to choose a servant girl for you. In the future, with me as your backing, the imperial palace will be your maiden home. You just have to be bold and rest assured as you move forward. The road ahead is still long, and your days will only get better. Don't be afraid, understand? Knowing that this was a fact that could not be changed, even if Ji Yun and Bing Tang were reluctant to part with Qin Yining, they could only thank him and leave while wiping away their tears. As soon as the two left, they saw Pang Xiao standing in front of them. The palace servants beside him all stood with their hands by their sides and kept quiet out of fear. They did not know how long he had been waiting in front of the door. The two hurriedly bowed to Pang Xiao, greetings to His Majesty. Pang Xiao waved his hand. He first craned his neck to look inside the room, then asked the two in a low voice, how is your master feeling right now? Of course she's sad. Bing Tang said in a low voice, it's just that the Empress is a strong-willed person. She can usually digest her sadness by herself. Pang Xiao's heart clenched. He thought of what the two children had said just now. The Yao clan was unscrupulous in front of the children. They were probably even worse in front of Qin Yining. He probably only knew a part of it. Qin Yining must have suffered a lot behind his back. You can leave. Pang Xiao could not wait any longer. He quickly walked into the hall, waved away the palace servants who were about to come forward to serve him, and quickly walked into the bedroom. Qin Yining heard the footsteps and came out to greet him. Seeing Pang Xiao's anxious face, he asked with a smile, what's wrong? Her eyes were still swollen. When she smiled, it was even more obvious. Her smile was even more pitiful. Pang Xiao pulled her hand and sat next to her on the heated Kong bed by the window. He hugged her and asked in a low voice, are you feeling better? Much better. I've already thought it through. Qin Yining smiled. His cheek rubbed against Pang Xiao's chest like a lazy cat. Father and mother have their own ideas. It's not a bad thing that they want to go to Shiyu. At most, I'll go visit them more in the future. Xiao Gu, that child. Qin Yining's voice choked. He suppressed his sadness and said helplessly, when the child grows up, he will leave me eventually. Right now, he just made a choice in advance. As parents, we don't want to imprison our children by our side. Instead, we want to find ways to let them live freely. There must be a reason why Xiao Gu, could make such a decision at such a young age. As long as he's not forced to do so, it's fine. You've really thought it through. Pang Xiao sighed, don't worry. Zhao Gu'er might grow up better with father-in-law by his side. In the future, we'll find ways to reunite more often. It's not like we can't come out of Shiyu forever. Although he said so, they were separated by thousands of mountains and rivers. It would not be easy to see each other in the future. Qin Yining knew this in his heart, but he did not dwell on it. After nodding in agreement, he reported the list of dowries and properties he prepared for Bing Tang, Ji Yun, and Lian Xiaozhou to Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao saw that he was in a good mood and increased it accordingly. He smiled and said, as their master, you're so generous to them. I can't be too harsh. Later, I'll give more rewards to Tang Xiu, Huzi, and Fong Hailing so that they won't be outdone. Both of them burst into laughter. It was almost the new year. This was the first new year in Daxin. The palace was decorated with lanterns and colored banners in preparation. It was the first year of the new emperor's ascension. The new year was equally important. They could not be careless. It was rare for Qin Yining to have some free time. He left everything to the imperial household department to prepare. Other than greeting the Empress Dowager in the morning, he spent the rest of his time with the children accompanying Qin Huayuan. The time they spent together became less and less. After the new year, Bing Tang and Ji Yun would get married. Qin Huayuan was ready to set off. Qin Yining cherished the current days even more. On New Year's Eve, there was no curfew in the capital. Tens of thousands of lights were lit. The red lanterns hung high. The tall palace walls were illuminated by the colorful fireworks in the sky. Every household was staying up for the new year. The sound of firecrackers crackled non-stop. The air was filled with the smell of fireworks. The adults were celebrating. The children were also jubilant. Brother Zhao, Brother Han, and Brother Yan were clapping and jumping in the courtyard of Cunning Palace. Some young palace maids and eunuchs were also following their masters. They looked up at the bright flowers blooming in the sky. Qin Yining withdrew his gaze from the window. When he turned around, he saw Qiu Feishan walking over with a smile. Empress. Qiu Feishan curtsied. Don't be like this. Qin Yining hurriedly reached out to support her. He smiled and said, today, we came to the palace to stay up for the new year. I don't know if you like it. Of course I like it. Qiu Feishan hesitated for a moment, but still said, after Fong Hailing and Miss Lian get married, our family is also planning to leave. We want to go back to Tianji Valley together. At this time, Qin Yining was no longer so surprised when she heard about the separation. After all, Mu Jinghu also had his own life. Pang Xiao was now successful. Mu Jinghu had no reason to stay by his side as a guard. Qin Yining nodded. Chapter 1205. Qiu Feishan lowered her eyes when she heard this, and her eyes immediately became as indifferent as before. What should be done has been done, and now this commoner also understands what is most important. In order to win back his feelings, this commoner has spent all her strength in the past few days. It was not easy to make him change his mind, and this commoner does not want to lose him again. Moreover, it is rare for a family to gather together, and this is enough for me, and I cannot ask for more. Qin Yining smiled. Qiu Feishan was really a person who knew how to speak, and these words not only showed her merit, but also completely catered to her preferences. Qin Yining was very clear about what kind of person Qiu Feishan was. She said that she wanted to live in seclusion with Mu Jinghu in the mountains, but could she really completely let go of everything that she had worked for all these years? Could she not care about the convenience that the hidden aristocratic families brought to the court? Qiu Feishan couldn't give up all fame and fortune for true love and family. She wasn't that kind of person. Qin Yining did not know how sincere Qiu Feishan's words were. But she did not say it out loud. Their status was now very different, and she could understand Qiu Feishan's desire to cater to her. In the end, Qin Yining did not care whether what Qiu Feishan said was true or false, and she had her own judgment. What was important was that Qiu Feishan would not harm Mu Jinghu, and Mu Jinghu really liked Qiu Feishan. Every family would reach its own balance, and she and Pang Xiao, as outsiders, should not interfere too much. To be able to find a way to live peacefully, that is great. Qin Yining smiled as she came to the corridor, and the red palace lanterns reflected a joyous atmosphere. Not far away, the palace servants came in with firework sticks. Brother Zhao, Brother Han, and Brother Yan each held 2 sticks in their hands. A young eunuch came forward and carefully lit them. The firework sticks made a sizzling sound, and a bunch of silver flowers suddenly bloomed, illuminating the children's rosy and smiling faces. They jumped and shouted happily, waving their little arms in a circle. The bright firework left a long tail, leaving a circle of light in the air. Mother, mother! As soon as they saw Qin Yining and Qiu Feishan standing in the corridor, the 3 children ran over one after another. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Be careful. Don't fall or burn yourself. Take care of Brother Yan and be careful." "I know. Mother, come and play." Brother Han stuffed the firework stick into Qin Yining's hands. However, the moment he handed it over to Qin Yining, the fireworks went out. The young eunuch on the side hurriedly came forward and lit 2 more sticks for Qin Yining, and then went back to serve the little princes. Qin Yining also had a playful heart, so she simply played with the children in the courtyard for a while. The cheerful laughter spread far and wide. Pang Xiao and Qin Huayuan were sitting in the side hall and talking. When they heard the laughter in the courtyard, they couldn't help but get up and come out to take a look. In the courtyard, Qin Yining has become the king of the children. She is wearing a cloud brocade cross-collar phoenix robe. Her rosy cheeks were much rosier than usual, and her bright eyes and white teeth were shining brightly. Pang Xiao's heart was moved. After going through so much, Qin Yining could still laugh so happily. It could be seen that she had already accepted many things. "I was originally worried that Sister Yi would be stubborn." Pang Xiao smiled and said to Qin Huayuan, "You and mother-in-law want to take Brother Zhao back to Xie. To Sister Yi, it's like cutting off an arm. She misses her parents, and she also misses her children. Unfortunately, the mountain is high and the road is long, and she can't leave me behind to go with you. I know her pain, but it's all good now. Seeing her like this, I'm relieved. Sister Yi isn't that kind of weak woman. Otherwise, she wouldn't have lived until I found her. She's a sensible child, and she's worth people sacrificing for her." Qin Huayuan stood with his hands behind his back. His beard fluttered in the wind, and his smile was gentle. Even though he was no longer young, he was still the world-renowned wise Panin. The aging of his face had been exchanged for the precipitation of time. This kind of steadiness accumulated from thousands of years of experience was something that Pang Xiao couldn't compare to. "Father-in-law, don't worry. I don't dare to forget Sister Yi's kindness to me for a moment over the years. My feelings for her are even deeper than before. I know father-in-law is worried about Sister Yi, and you can't trust me." "No. Your Majesty." Qin Huayuan looked at Pang Xiao with a smile and interrupted him, "Of course I trust you. Otherwise, I wouldn't be willing to leave my daughter and grandson by your side. But I also know that you're in a difficult position. When you were an official, it was inevitable that you would make some in-laws in order to win over your colleagues. You couldn't refuse the beautiful concubines that your colleagues gave you. As an emperor, this kind of thing will only happen more often. It's not that I don't trust your character, but I understand all too well the difficulties involved. Qin Huayuan smiled again, but as a father, it's my responsibility to leave a way out for my daughter, and it's also my intention. This has nothing to do with establishing an independent dynasty or anything like that. Pang Shao also had trusted strategists. Those officials who had contributed to the emperor's ascension all had their own thoughts. A few of his most trusted aides also knew about the matter of Xia. Qin Huayuan was unwilling to stay in the capital to retire, but instead wanted to bring the eldest prince to Xia to develop his career. This inevitably made these officials suspicious. How old was the eldest prince? As long as Qin Huayuan had the heart to be independent, he could easily control this child. When the time came for Xia to develop and grow, wouldn't it become the second Titan? The reason why no one spoke of these suspicions in front of Pang Shao was because Pang Shao had doted on and respected Qin Yining these days. It made the subordinates think more before speaking. But even if no one said it, how could someone as experienced as Qin Huayuan not think of it? He said this to let Pang Shao know his thoughts. People's hearts were easy to change. This was to prevent Pang Shao from thinking of this in the future and feeling resentment and fear. How could Pang Shao not understand Qin Huayuan's meaning? He repeatedly waved his hand and solemnly said, "I understand father-in-law's meaning. We are a family. There's no need to beat around the bush." To say something that might seem hypocritical, when I first decided to conquer the world, 80% of the reason was so that Sister Yi and our entire family would no longer be tortured and manipulated by others. It doesn't make sense that now that I'm finally standing in this position, I've forgotten my original intentions. Qin Huayuan smiled and nodded. He naturally understood that Pang Shao was speaking the truth. It was just that times had changed. How many people's hearts could remain unchanged for tens of years? Bing Tang and Huzi, Ji Yun and Tang Xiu, and Lian Xiaozhou and Fang Hailing's wedding day was set for the 16th day of the first month. Qin Yining had the three brides stay in his palace on the 15th day. Tomorrow evening, you will be married at my place. Right now, you don't have parents or relatives. I am your maternal family, and Cunning Palace is your maternal family. Qin Yining looked at the three people in front of him and said rather emotionally, "When you return home in 3 days, I will send someone to bring you back. Have you looked at the dowry list? Is there anything else that I missed?" Chapter 1206. Qin Yining stood up with a smile and took out a handkerchief to wipe the tears of the three people. "Isn't it good that I've prepared everything for you? All right, don't cry. It'll be ugly tomorrow with swollen eyes on the sedan chair." Bing Tang sobbed and said, "I have an ointment to reduce swelling. I'm not afraid." Lian Xiaozhou also said, "I'm not afraid either." She sobbed and came forward to hug Qin Yining. "Jijia, I don't want to leave you." But they all knew that in the future, Ji Yun and Bing Tang would have many opportunities to meet Qin Yining. Lian Xiaozhou would have to return to Tianji Valley. If there wasn't anything important, they would have very few opportunities to meet. With the temperament of the people of Tianji Valley, they wouldn't casually come out again. Qin Yining patted her back and said with a choked voice, "I don't know if it was right or wrong to betroth you to Fang Hailing. When I asked you to help, I was afraid that I would harm you." Lian Xiaozhou shook her head repeatedly. "If it wasn't for Jijia saving me, I would have starved to death in the mountains sooner or later. Otherwise, I would have been eaten by wild beasts. I know that Jijia is good to me and I believe that Jijia will protect me." Qin Yining's heart was warm and he nodded with a smile. There were still feelings worth trusting in this world. She wouldn't betray Lian Xiaozhou and Lian Xiaozhou had always believed in her. This was truly commendable. Ji Yun and Bing Tang also gathered around. The four of them hugged each other and cried for a long time. If it wasn't for Qin Yining still wanting to leave and not wanting to delay tomorrow's wedding, she would have wanted to keep the three of them to sleep in front of her. The next morning, before the sky was bright, Qin Yining got up and had someone help him wash and dress up. There was going to be a wedding in the palace. The ones getting married were the Empress's 3 maidservants. The Empress had long recognized the 3 as her sworn sisters. Even the Emperor attached great importance to this matter. The palace servants naturally attached great importance to it. The atmosphere in the palace early in the morning was different. Brother Zhao and Brother Han both wore red jackets and dressed up like New Year's dolls. They accompanied the bride with the Sun clan, Madame Ma, and Madame Zheng. Qin Yining first went to Xi'an Palace to greet Empress Dowager Yao early in the morning. Empress Dowager Yao knew that there was a happy occasion today, but she rolled her eyes and coldly snorted, "She's just a lowly palace maid, yet she's worthy of the Empress' attention. The Empress is a person of noble status. She is no longer an ordinary woman with a title. She should have a sense of propriety. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at by others for making such a grand wedding for a palace maid?" Qin Yining was too lazy to argue with Empress Dowager Yao. She only said a few words to shut her up. The Empress Dowager is right, this wife is only following the Emperor's orders. This wife is only a woman, how could she do anything? If the Empress Dowager feels that it's inappropriate, why don't this wife ask the Emperor to cancel this matter? You don't use Dai Fu to suppress Aijia. Did Aijia grow up being scared? Not to mention that Dai Fu just became the Emperor. Even if he became the Jade Emperor, he crawled out of Aijia's stomach. Qin Yining became more and more impatient. Empress Dowager, please calm down. This wife will go back and reflect on her mistakes. She bowed and quickly walked out with Ziyuan and Han Shao. Empress Dowager Yao was so angry that she couldn't do anything. Look for Pang Shao. It would be strange if Pang Shao was willing to help her. Qin Yining returned to Qinkuan Palace and was busy talking to the brides in the side hall. The whole day was full of wedding procedures, and the 3 dowries prepared by Qin Yining had been placed in the courtyard with red silk flowers. In the evening, the sky was already dark, but the biting cold wind couldn't disperse the enthusiasm of the crowd. When the big red lanterns were hung high and the joyous sounds of makeup were heard outside, Nanny Sheik hurriedly looked at the wedding clothes the 3 people were wearing and put on matching red veils. She was afraid that something would go wrong, so she carefully helped the 3 newlyweds out. Qin Yining quickly caught up with them and walked on the red carpet behind them. She kept reminding them in a low voice. You're all mistresses in the future. Take care of yourselves and come to me if you have any difficulties. If you're free, you can come to see me at any time. If they don't treat you well or make you feel wronged, you can come to me. Bing Tang's voice came through the red veil, and she was a little choked up. Empress Dowager, don't worry. I will come to see you often in the future. Yes, elder sister. Lian Xiaozhou complained, but her voice was trembling. You have been nagging me all day. I don't want to get married anymore. Qin Yining's eyes were full of tears, and she said with a smile, Okay. I won't be long-winded. I will only send you to the gate of Qinkuan Palace, and then you can go home. Your good future is ahead of you. I wish you all 100 years of happiness with the person you love and grow old together. Her words made the 3 newlyweds cry again. Nanny She helped the 3 newlyweds into the bridal sedan. Qin Yining stood to the side and didn't say anything else. The sound of blowing and beating approached, and with the sound of firecrackers, the 3 bridal sedan chairs were carried out. Qinkuan Palace, which had been noisy all day, suddenly quieted down. Qin Yining stood in front of the palace gate for a long time, and when the bridal sedan chairs were out of sight, she sighed and turned back. Without Ji Yun and Bing Tang by her side, she was very uncomfortable, but she knew that she had to slowly get used to it. The meeting between people was short, and the separation was long. She was able to have such a period of time where they were as close as sisters, and now they had their own happiness and were rushing towards their own lives. Although she was disappointed, she was also happy for them. At the same time, in the Imperial Garden, Peng Xiao and Ji Ziyu also dismissed the people around them, and walked one after the other on the quiet stone path in the winter night. Head eunuch Lu Anfu, with a group of eunuchs and imperial bodyguards, only followed from a distance and didn't get close. Peng Xiao said with a smile, Huzi and Tang Xiu, those two brats, are going to get married. They are so happy that they can't tell north from south. Alon, I will find you a good girl later, and your marriage should be decided. Ji Ziyu raised his eyebrows. This official is afraid. There is no need to bestow a marriage. Peng Xiao laughed and patted Ji Ziyu's shoulder. There are no outsiders here, you don't have to be so restrained. We are just brothers, let's talk. Ji Ziyu smiled, but his delicate brows couldn't help but furrow. Peng Xiao said, I plan to make your title hereditary. In the future, your descendants will all be Duke Dinghua. Tell me, don't you want to get married as soon as possible, so that when you have descendants, they can come and play with their older brothers and sisters? Ji Ziyu's smile was faint and there was no extra emotion on his incomparably handsome face. His eyes flashed and in the end, he still opened his mouth. Emperor, in fact, this subject came today to resign with you. Peng Xiao was stunned when he heard this, and his footsteps also stopped. Resign? Is there something going on in the imperial court that is not going well? Or did I do something wrong? Alon, there is no need for us brothers to beat around the bush. If there is anything you are dissatisfied with, you can tell me. Why do you want to resign? Emperor. Ji Ziyu turned around and looked up at Peng Xiao. The long cloak with the snow fox fur collar was loosely draped over his shoulders, revealing the snow-white collar. When he raised his head, the beautiful curve of his neck and Adam's apple were revealed in an unguarded manner. Emperor, how am I dissatisfied? I just am finding it harder and harder to control my thoughts. Peng Xiao was stunned and didn't know what was going on for a while. Seeing Peng Xiao's expression, Ji Ziyu smiled again. He was born with a handsome face that normal men didn't have, but he rarely smiled. Today, he was smiling more than usual. He walked 2 steps forward with his hands behind his back, as if he was thinking about something. After a while, he suddenly let out a long sigh, as if something was suddenly released. In a person's life, how long can the best years last? Oh. This subject has worked hard for this country for the first half of my life. Now that the country is stable, the Tatars in the north don't dare to invade again, and the southern Yan in the south are as quiet as quails. Crushing them is only a matter of time. There is nothing for me to worry about in this country anymore. I also want to retire and do some things that I want to do while I'm still young. Alon, you don't want to stay by my side and help me? Peng Xiao's voice couldn't help but be a bit anxious. He grabbed Ji Ziyu's wrist and carefully looked at him as he said, everyone says that it is easy to create a dynasty, but hard to protect it. The difficult days are still ahead. You and I have fought side by side until now, and there will be so many dangers in the future. I need someone I can trust, and the one I trust the most is you. It is this subject's honor that the emperor is willing to trust this subject. But after so many years, this subject is really tired. Ji Ziyu's voice was filled with unsolvable sadness, now that the country is stable, and the emperor's position is stable. You have your wife and children by your side, and there are no foreign enemies. With the emperor and his subordinates' abilities, it will only take a few years for this country to be orderly. There is no need for me here. But, Emperor, I don't want everything to change beyond recognition in the future. I thank the Emperor for your permission. Ji Ziyu respectfully bowed to Peng Xiao. Peng Xiao hurriedly reached out to help him up. Of course, he understood what Jiziyu was saying. When they first became sworn brothers with Li Qitian, they had given their hearts to each other. It was common for them to save each other's lives when they fought for the country. At least half of the blood shed by the three of them was for each other. But what happened to the three of them now? Li Qitian was imprisoned in the basement. Ji Ziyu was planning to leave the imperial court for some insignificant matters. Then he thought about Qin Yining's family. Not everyone was willing to sit on the emperor's throne. At least, if he wasn't the emperor, Qin Huaiyuan wouldn't have tried to give Qin Yining a way out. And Ji Ziyu would not be polite to him and say that he wanted to resign. Pang Xiao gritted his teeth. After a long time, he squeezed out a sentence. Alon, you've really made your decision. Ji Ziyu looked into Pang Xiao's eyes. After a long time, he nodded and said with a relieved smile, yes, I've made my decision. Everyone had their own ambitions. Pang Xiao knew that he couldn't stop him. But he felt like a big stone was pressing down on his heart. He patted Ji Ziyu's shoulder, but couldn't say anything. The two of them walked for a while more before Ji Ziyu said his goodbyes and left. Alon, I'll keep your official position and title for you. If you want to come back, you can come back at any time. Pang Xiao walked Ji Ziyu to the corner gate of the imperial garden. Ji Ziyu smiled and nodded. But he knew in his heart that if he left, he would never be able to come back to be an official in this life. Chapter 1207. Ji Ziyu had indeed made up his mind. The next day, he handed over the memorial to the emperor. Pang Xiao still said the same thing, Alon, if you want to travel around, then go ahead. But don't forget to come back. You have a home in the capital. I'll keep your duke's mansion, title, and official position for you. The high and mighty emperor still referred to himself as I when he said these words to Ji Ziyu. He wasn't pretending to be close to him, nor was he trying to be approachable. Ji Ziyu knew that Pang Xiao had always trusted and been close to him from the bottom of his heart. Unlike Li Qitian, who had become high and mighty after taking over the throne. Even when they were close to each other, he was just putting on a show for others to see. Ji Ziyu's eyes reddened. Such a good Pang Xiao, he hurriedly lowered his head to hide his surging emotions. After a long time, he bowed and said in a hoarse voice, Thank you, Emperor. This subject is eternally grateful. Why are you so polite? Pang Xiao hurriedly helped him up inside. Have you decided on a date to leave? Where do you want to go first? I'll send you off then. Emperor, you're busy with court affairs. No matter how busy you are, there's still time. Pang Xiao didn't wait for Ji Ziyu to finish his words and made a strong decision. Ji Ziyu felt both sweet and bitter in his heart. Suddenly, he didn't want to leave. But he didn't say anything. He just bowed his head in tacit agreement. After the court meeting, his colleagues all expressed their regret for Ji Ziyu's decision. Although he had already resigned from his position, they knew from the emperor's attitude that even if he became an idler, he was still the emperor's sworn brother and the most respected idler. Therefore, their attitude towards Ji Ziyu could only be more intimate and respectful. They didn't dare to slight him at all. Ji Ziyu returned to the duke's mansion. Looking at the huge courtyard, he felt at a loss. He had been carrying a heavy burden on his shoulders for too long. Now that he had been relieved, he didn't know how to live his life well. Ji Ziyu wandered aimlessly around the mansion, and by the time he came back to his senses, he was already back in the stable. The snow-white horse was proudly tied up in the stable. Just by looking at the shape of its bones, one could tell that it was different from the rest. It seemed to have a mind of its own. When it saw Ji Ziyu, it raised its head. Its shiny fur glowed faintly under the sunlight, making it look exceptionally beautiful. Ji Ziyu stepped forward. White Cloud moved closer to him, lowered its head, and intimately rubbed against Ji Ziyu's face. Ji Ziyu stretched out his arms and hugged the horse's neck tiredly. He closed his eyes and buried his face in it. Forget it, so be it. The next day, the Chamberlain of Dependencies received the envoys from the Southern Yen. The envoy respectfully presented a generous gift, dripping with blood, which was enough to shock the entire court. In the throne room, there were 2 exquisite boxes containing 2 human heads that had been specially treated with embalming. Because the old man and the young man had died peacefully. Everyone saw it very clearly. They were Gu Shixiang and the Yuqi Yen. Greetings to the Emperor of the Great Xan Dynasty. Our Emperor has always admired the Emperor of the Great Xan Dynasty. Even when chatting with the officials, he would always mention the heroic deeds of the Emperor of the Great Xan Dynasty. The Yuqi Yen and Gu Shixiang were the remnants of the Dayan. A few days ago, they hid in the Southern Yen. They actually had the intention to contact their former subordinates. Now that the Great Xan Dynasty is peaceful and the people are at peace, the people are finally able to live a peaceful life. How could we allow people like them to ruin it? My emperor made a prompt decision and offered the heads of the 2. Firstly, it was to stabilize the country. Secondly, it was to show the sincerity of our country to the Emperor of the Great Xan Dynasty. I hope that the Emperor of the Great Xan Dynasty will understand. Pang Xiao looked down at the Yuqi Yen and Gu Shixiang's heads in the boxes. He was silent for a while before he said, although the Yuqi Yen is the ruler of a fallen country, he is still the ruler of a country. The Yen dynasty's imperial mausoleum still has a place. Let's send the Yuqi Yen back to the imperial mausoleum in the old capital of the Yen dynasty. As for Gu Shixiang, he assisted the 3 emperors. Although his position is different from ours, we cannot deny his loyalty. This old man can only be respected and buried. The emperor is wise. The officials cheered in unison. Pang Zhao's action made them admire him very much. After the Yuqi Yen joined the Li Qitian, he often opposed the emperor when he was still the Prince Zhongshuan. Now, the emperor was willing to let him be buried in the Yuqi family's imperial mausoleum and give the Yuqi Yen and Gu Shixiang dignity. 100 years was already benevolent. The Southern Yen envoy saw Pang Zhao's attitude and cold sweat almost drip down. He said, Emperor, our Southern Yen is located in a corner of the sea. Our country is small and weak. We really don't want to have any more disputes. These years, our country is only trying to stabilize and develop. Pang Xiao smiled and just nodded. The Southern Yen envoy lowered his head and didn't dare to look directly at the emperor. He said, therefore, the new emperor really doesn't need to be so cautious. Even if the Southern Yen border doesn't have the Southern Pacifying Army, and there aren't dozens of warships outside Southern Yen's coastal defense, Southern Yen will definitely not be disloyal to the Great New Wave. The Southern Pacifying Army was currently guarding the border between the 2 countries in the south. This group of men who had just returned from the battlefield, even their spirit was different from ordinary soldiers. When they stood there, they were filled with murderous intent. Just a casual roar was enough to make the Southern Yen border army tremble with fear. They were afraid that the other side would directly attack. The Southern Yen border was near the sea. They thought that they had the final say in the sea. But who knew that at some point, there were dozens of warships of various sizes approaching and surrounding Southern Yen's coastal defense. The Southern Yen emperor and officials really couldn't think of any other way. That was why they deceived the Yuqi Yen and Gu Shixiang who had fled to the Southern Yen border. After killing them, they offered their heads as a show of sincerity and asked for peace. When they heard that there were dozens of warships surrounding Southern Yan's coastal defense, the officials didn't know what was going on. Pang Xiao smiled and said, these warships are the ones that the northern Ji country had docked at the Golden Harbor. At that time, the previous emperor intended to dismantle the warships to build the imperial mausoleum. It was thanks to Liu Yun's many efforts that these warships were protected. Otherwise, our Daxin's coastal defense would still be a big hidden danger. If we were to allocate funds to build more warships, firstly, it would be difficult to find an old craftsman. Secondly, the cost would be huge. I am very grateful. The officials were suddenly enlightened. Those who were simple-minded only thought that Liu Yun was doing his best to protect these warships. But those who were more flexible had already guessed that the current emperor must have made some efforts. Otherwise, with just Liu Yun, a scholar, no matter how powerful his family was, it would be difficult to transport the warships away from the Golden Harbor. While the officials were discussing, the Southern Yan envoy was already sweating profusely. Seeing that Pang Xiao ignored him, he hurriedly said, "Daxin's emperor, our Southern Yan emperor has always been grateful to you for saving his life. He also knows the strength of Daxin. Our Southern Yan is willing to pay tribute year after year and be a subject. We are willing to be a subordinate of Daxin." As he spoke, he pressed his forehead against the ground. He was afraid that Pang Xiao wouldn't agree, so he looked over. In fact, an army that had just experienced the baptism of war was the most difficult to resist. If they really went to war, the ones who would suffer would be the common people. Pang Xiao smiled and comforted the envoy with a few words. He instructed people to treat him well and not neglect him. He didn't make a clear statement. And the more Pang Xiao acted like this, the more uneasy the envoy felt. When he left the capital and rushed back to Southern Yan, he was on tenterhooks all the way, afraid that Pang Xiao would order people to attack. Regarding the issue of Southern Yan, the officials were divided into two rows. Some wanted to fight, and some felt that it was urgent to postpone the discussion. This topic was discussed for half a month, but there was still no conclusion. On the other hand, Qin Huaiyuan's group had already finished their preparations during this period of time. 30 li outside the capital, Qin Yining was dressed like an ordinary noble lady. With tears in her eyes, she knelt in front of Qin Huaiyuan, the Sun Clan, and Madame Zheng. She kowtowed solemnly. "Father, mother, grandmother. I don't know when we will be able to see each other again. Father, mother, grandmother, please take care of your health. Don't overwork yourself with state affairs. Your daughter will always pray for your health. When things are settled here, your daughter will go and see you." Qin Huaiyuan smiled and went forward to help Qin Yining up. However, Qin Yining refused to get up. She choked with sobs and said, "If it weren't for me, father and mother wouldn't have decided to stay in that kind of place and suffer. Your daughter can't be filial by her side and has to burden father and mother. Your daughter feels guilty. Silly child." Qin Huaiyuan helped Qin Yining up and patted her back. "You just have to stay here and take care of your husband and children. Father's decision wasn't purely for your sake. This is what father truly wants to do. Father can find a direction to work hard in and work hard willingly. This sense of accomplishment is as sweet as syrup. You don't have to bear such a heavy burden in your heart." Qin Yining nodded. She held back her tears, not letting them fall. Chao Yuqing hugged Brother Zhao's shoulder and said with a smile, "Don't worry. We will take good care of Brother Zhao. I guarantee that the next time we meet, Brother Zhao will be an indomitable little man." Qin Yining almost couldn't hold back her tears at the mention of the child she had to part with. Brother Zhao, however, raised his head like a little adult. "Mother." Qin Yining squatted in front of Brother Zhao and touched his fair little face. She tapped the little red mole between his eyebrows and smiled. Brother Zhao also smiled. "Mother, if someone bullies you, you can come and find me." Brother Han was unconvinced. "With me here, no one will bully mother." The two children stuck out their tongues and made funny faces at each other. The originally sad atmosphere was suddenly diluted. Pang Xiao respectfully bowed to Qin Huaiyuan and the other elders. Father-in-law, please rest assured. I will never go back on my words. In this life, I will only be good to Sister Yi. Now, whatever I say is futile. Fortunately, time will prove everything I say. Qin Huaiyuan smiled and didn't answer. He only said, take care. Take care. Liao Zhibing and the others had been waiting for a long time with the brothers of the Qin Tian alliance. They helped Qin Huaiyuan and the others into the car. Pang Xiao patted Mu Jinghu's shoulder and said, Blockhead, thank you for your hard work. It's not hard. Don't worry, I will send Uncle Qin and the others to a safe place. After that, we will return to Tianji Valley. Pang Xiao smiled and said, with you here, I am naturally relieved. Qiu Feishan, who was beside Mu Jinghu, hugged Brother Yan. Fong Hailing held Lian Xiaozhou's hand and bowed to Pang Xiao and Qin Yining together. Sister, we are leaving. Lian Xiaozhou's eyes were red and swollen like walnuts. She came forward and hugged Qin Yining. Qin Yining patted her back and still held back his tears. He smiled and said, silly girl, don't cry. From now on, it will be your own life. Live well. If you are not Rui, you can come back. As I said, my place will always be your home. An. Lian Xiaozhou nodded heavily and hugged Bing Tang and Ji Yun again. Sister Bing Tang, Sister Ji Yun, take care of yourselves. You too. Bing Tang sobbed. After Lian Xiaozhou was brought back by Qin Yining, she had always liked to stay by her side. She also especially cherished the little girl who could not even speak at that time. Now, they had their own families and lives. She did not know when she would see them again after this farewell. Everyone got on the carriage. Qiu Feishan also got on the carriage with Brother Yan. Mu Jinghu rode beside the carriage and waved goodbye to Qin Yining and Pang Xiao with a smile. Chia! The coachman waved his whip and the carriage set off on the official road. Qin Yining and Pang Xiao stood there with Brother Han. Brother Zhao leaned half of his body out of the carriage window and waved vigorously at Qin Yining and Pang Xiao. Seeing that they were really going to separate, Brother Han, who was smiling and making funny faces, finally burst into tears. Brother! Brother! Brother Han chased after them for 2 steps but stopped abruptly. He covered his face and cried loudly. What answered him was Brother Zhao's cries from inside the carriage. The tears that Qin Yining held back all morning finally fell, but he still refused to let go of his waving hand until the carriage completely disappeared from sight. This was a secluded valley. Everything was green and the wind blew, bringing with it the unique fragrance of green grass. In the valley, there was a huge mansion built beside the mountains and water. At this time, a woman with a round figure and medium-length hair, wearing a loose cultivator's robe, was sitting on a drunkard's chair and waving a cattail leaf fan. There were 2 small stools in front of her. A man and a woman sat on her left and right. The scene was somewhat solemn. This celestial lady has the ability to see through heaven and earth. I know the past 500 years and the future 500 years. With a pinch of my fingers, how can I not know what the emperor is thinking? If I'm alive, he won't let me go. Why don't I do him a favor? Look, this celestial lady is living a carefree life now. I won't get involved in those rotten things anymore. Master, you really lied to me so bitterly. How many tears have I shed for nothing? Mu Jinghu's face was ashen. Just as he finished complaining, Tian Jizi smacked him on the head with a fan. Little brat, I don't blame you for only caring about your good brother and not caring about my life or death. You're blaming me for not being completely dead. Back then, in order to save the Qin clan, I lost half of my reputation. Even if I schemed against her and wanted to kill her, I've already paid for what I should have done. Her man has ascended the throne and become the emperor. What else do you want me to do, huh? Do you want me to die before you're satisfied? That's not what I meant. But, isn't it not good to deceive Jishi like this? Not good. Tian Jizi sat up straight. Do you know how hard it was for me to pretend to be dead? That Qin clan was like a monkey. If there was even the slightest flaw, I wouldn't be able to get away. Let me tell you, it wasn't easy for me to have the peaceful days I have now. If you dare to tell anyone, you won't be a member of the Tianji sect anymore. Mu Jinghu was silent. After all, he was greatly indebted to the Tianji sect. He didn't want to betray the sect. Qiu Feishan said, "Let's listen to Master." What's more, hiding Master's life and death won't affect the matter between the Emperor and the Empress, right? Mu Jinghu raised his eyes and looked at Tian Jizi. After a long struggle in his heart, he finally nodded. In any case, with him watching, it wouldn't be convenient for Tian Jizi to go out and continue to swindle people after faking her death. Thinking about it, there wouldn't be any big problems, right? Tian Jizi once again leaned back on the drunkard's chair and leisurely rocked back and forth. Hey, you guys, don't think that the current emperor is a fool. He's much more shrewd than that guy Li Qitian. Li Qitian wasn't cut out to be the emperor, yet he still insisted on sticking a big onion into the pig's nose. Look, what kind of end did he end up in? Life imprisonment, unable to beg for life, unable to beg for death. This was also the result of his insistence. Just like the Liu family, such a big family with complicated roots, Li Qitian, that idiot, actually allowed it to exist. Aristocratic families are so powerful, they're a big threat to the imperial power. Li Qitian didn't think about how to disintegrate and remove them, but instead relied on aristocratic families. He's simply pushing himself onto the path of a puppet, Pei. Tian Jizi spat. When she turned her head, she saw Qiu Feishan. She slowed down her speech, but each word was sonorous and powerful. The current emperor will not allow a family like the Liu family to exist. He will not allow aristocratic families to be so powerful that they can infiltrate the officialdom of the imperial court, because he has seen with his own eyes the harm such aristocratic families can do to the imperial court. Qiu Feishan's face was a little stiff. Tian Jizi unceremoniously rolled her eyes. Hey, some people claim to be smart, but in the end, they're digging their own graves. Even if you're deceiving a fool, you should know when to stop. Mu Jinghu blinked and said, Shizhuan, she has already severed her relationship with the Qiu family. Even if the emperor wants to deal with the Qiu family, it has nothing to do with her. Is that so? That's good. Tian Jizi smiled and waved her fan. I want to eat watermelon, I want to eat sweet and sour pork, I want to eat dompa pig knuckle. The topic changed too quickly, making Mu Jinghu stunned for a moment. Qiu Feishan hurriedly stood up and said, I'll go to the kitchen to prepare. Then she quickly left. The courtyard was silent again. Tian Jizi covered her face with her fan, as if she was asleep. Mu Jinghu stood up and walked towards the kitchen. The red sun slowly jumped out of the clouds. The sky was full of rosy clouds, almost connecting with the golden sea in the distance. Qin Yining looked at the two men not far away, not saying a word. Pang Xiao frowned and looked at Ji Ziyu, who was wearing a wide-sleeved white robe. All on, are you really going to go out to sea with the merchant ship? If you want to relax, where can't you go? The sea is very windy and dangerous. If you meet the barbarians, you can't understand what they're saying. When you're on the sea, you can only see water everywhere. What's so fun about it? Ji Ziyu smiled, raised the horsewhip and said, even if I'm going out to sea, I'll bring this whip with me. If I don't come back, and you find this whip in the future, it means nonsense. Pang Xiao angrily rebuked. When he was searching for Qin Yining and the situation was at its worst, Ji Ziyu gave him the horsewhip to make it easier for him to command his subordinates. The Dragon Stallion army soldiers in the northern borders all recognized that horsewhip. In exchange, Pang Xiao also gave his horsewhip to Ji Ziyu, and Ji Ziyu used Pang Xiao's horsewhip until now. Ji Ziyu turned to look at Qin Yining, who was not far away, and smiled. He took the reins from the servant behind him and led the shiny white horse over slowly. Qin Yining looked at Ji Ziyu with a complicated gaze. Empress. I stole this horse from you years ago, and it has followed me everywhere since then. Now that I'm going out to sea, I'm giving it to you. I hope you can take good care of it. As he spoke, he handed the reins to Qin Yining. Under the morning light, Ji Ziyu's bony hands were half hidden in his wide sleeves as he handed the reins to Qin Yining. Qin Yining slowly raised his hand and took it. White Cloud seemed to know that its master was leaving, and it leaned down and rubbed against Ji Ziyu affectionately. Ji Ziyu smiled and patted it. His warm smile was like he was treating his own child. Ji Ziyu smiled. Empress, what's yours will always be yours. Now, it's returned to its rightful owner. Take care. Qin Yining seemed to have something stuck in his throat, and he could only say this. Ji Ziyu smiled and nodded. He turned around and patted Pang Xiao's shoulder. Then he picked up the horsewhip and strode towards the small boat docked at the Golden Harbor. He borrowed the momentum of the small boat to move towards the large merchant ship. The servants and guards accompanying him hurriedly bowed to Pang Xiao and Qin Yining, and then quickly followed. Pang Xiao's furrowed eyebrows gradually relaxed as he watched Chu Yang's slender figure jump from the small boat onto the rope ladder. He then stepped on the steps and boarded the big ship. Pang Xiao shouted, "Be careful and come back soon." It was unknown if Ji Ziyu heard him from the side of the ship, but he just waved his hand at him. The boatman shouted, and the merchant ship raised its sails. With the wind blowing, it sailed towards the sea in the morning light. Qin Yining led the white horse and stood beside Pang Xiao. They watched as the ship went further and further away until it became a black dot on the sea surface. Only then did they look at each other. Pang Xiao smiled and said, "Let's go. Golden Harbor hasn't been here for a long time. I'll take you out to play for 2 days before going back." Qin Yining raised his eyebrows, and his large eyes were full of ridicule. "Playing with me? Aren't you afraid that the imperial censors will accuse you of not attending to the court? Let them be. It won't be too late to think about it when I really delay the court." As he spoke, he domineeringly pulled Qin Yining towards Golden Harbor City. Behind him, Huzi hurriedly led several Jinghu Wei servants to quickly follow with a smile. A gust of summer wind with the smell of the sea blew past. It blew past Qin Yining's hair, past Pang Xiao's smiling handsome face, and past the faint footprints on the grass behind them, making a happy rustling sound. The morning sun had risen. It was a brand new day. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.